Okay, it's 1:30. We'll call the meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Other individuals and the media may also be audibly and/or visually recording this meeting. All electronic devices are to be switched to non-audible function during committee meetings. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have two changes to the agenda. We have one delegation request from Cheryl Green from the Hamilton Regional Indian Center respecting the Housing First for Youth project at the Hamilton Regional Indian Center. The recommendation is that be approved. We also have a notice of motion from Councillor Nan on Pride Hamilton funding. In addition, although not a change to the agenda, we did have some late added items to the agenda package for items 8.1 and 8.9, or sorry, 8.1 and 9.1. All of those items have been added to the agenda package and distributed today.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. May I have a motion for the approval of the agenda? Moved by Nan, second by Pauls. All in favor, and it's an electronic vote. Okay, and that carries. Now moving on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Hearing none, may I have a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of the May 16th, 2019 meeting, moved by Clark, seconded by Jackson. All in favor, and it's a recorded vote. And that carries. Moving on to 6.1, we have Cheryl Green's delegation request from the Hamilton Regional Indian Center respecting Housing First for Youth project at the Hamilton Regional Indian Center. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the delegation request? Moved by Nan, seconded by Clark. All in favor, and it's an electronic vote. And that carries. We're now moving on to consent items, and we have 7.1 before us. I would like to call upon Paul Johnson, General Manager, Healthy and Safe Communities, to introduce item 7.1. There will be a video, approximately 8 minutes in length, for this item as well. Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two things. We were asked at our last meeting to provide regular updates on the wind down of the Addiction Services Initiative, and that's the reason for the information report here. However, after that request was made, we also had some conversations, our staff were having conversations with some of the folks who have been supported through this program, and they indicated a desire to share some of their thoughts with the public and with this committee, and have done so through a video that we'd like to show today. So rather than delegations coming forward, they felt a bit more comfortable doing this video. So I think we can just tee this up and let that go. And then, of course, we're here to answer any questions that you may have about the information report itself. But we thought that this would animate the discussion we've had about this service a little bit better.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Confusion. I wanted to do so many different things and stop certain things, and I did not know how to do it. I knew what I wanted to do, but to actually do it.
I'm originally from New Brunswick. I found myself in Ontario at the end of December, homeless, and struggling with complex post-traumatic stress disorder and a number of other things. I made it to Ontario as a quest, last-ditch attempt to save my life, quite literally.
My life was completely out of balance. I was all alone. It was horrible, disgusting, all over the place. I was harming myself and all others around me.
My outside supports had been terminated.
Checked myself into 4, 5 different rehabs. They all offered the same program, good programs, but just wasn't right for me.
I had a great job, lost it, and fell into an addiction. I was on a very downward spiral path.
One of the things that I really enjoyed about the ASI program is that it's like a one-stop shop. I get my addictions counseling, my trauma counseling, my groups, my socializing that is a safe place for socializing, all in one service.
The ASI program gives me a chance to take a chance, and it gives me the opportunity to feel proud again with who I am. Proud of what I was before, and proud that I had the guts enough to ask for help.
People will actually care, they listen to you. They don't judge you, they don't put you down, they're there to listen and help you and find the right path to getting back onto a good life, and that's what's happened to me.
Listen to what you had to say. Listen to how you were feeling and try to understand that, and that makes a difference.
I felt really supported by the ASI Beginning Today program. I felt like I had access to all the services and supports that I needed, such as one-on-one counseling and groups.
This program allows us or helps us keep the drive in to look for meaningful jobs or just wanting to live properly.
My experience with this program has positively benefited my life for a better tomorrow.
I had trouble in group meetings, but the wonderful people here made it custom made for me and made it possible that I could have one-on-one counseling, which worked for me better than any of the other rehabs that I've been to.
We addressed multiple things that were going on in my life, and we had sat down and decided what was going to work for me.
In the groups, I felt like I was in a safe space where I could discuss my addiction and trauma, and I felt like it was a space where it was conducive to my recovery and healing.
Just a great place to socialize with other people in recovery, which is something that I don't have outside of this group.
The ability to just come here when I needed to, if I needed to have a safe space, or if I was going through a rough time and I just needed someone to be able to see me, to check on me, to make sure that I was okay, all of that was here.
In my journey to recovery, I guess one of the most notable things is that I was able to get off Suboxone, and I think that this program really helped me because it gave me something to do, a destination.
Since I've been able to participate in this program, I have made some massive self-progress. I have been able to build some resiliency to a level that I didn't think I'd be able to.
You know, the program, it boosts you. They never judge you. They give you all the opportunities you could want to go back to school again, to just to live life like a normal person again.
This program helped me do all of those things that I thought were not possible, that I thought I could not do, or that I was not worthy of.
I'm going back to school to update and do my career. I've stayed clean. I've met some new friends. I actually feel that I mean something in the world.
Stopped doing my addiction. I started going to the gym every day, doing the stairs. I started riding a bike 50 to 100 kilometers a day. I got so healthy.
Start to rebuild a life that I thought was worth living for myself, and to be able to feel that I could contribute and that I could come back into society, and that this wasn't my life wasn't over, and that I could keep going.
I have been able to set goals and achieve them, such as establish a home and maintain it. I have also applied for school and am in the process of completing my education to get my diploma. I've also moved forward with my career goals and will start volunteering, and I feel like none of this would have been possible if I didn't receive the supports from this program.
I'm really concerned about how I'm going to put in all of these tools that I've gotten from this program. how I'm going to find them in other areas of the community to be able to keep going with the work that I've done here.
Hoping that I can continue finding other self-help groups outside of the ASI program, but I really did like that it was in one package, and that I didn't have to go out seeking these things all on my own.
I feel concerned about the ASI Beginning Today program ending. I feel like a forced termination may not be conducive to my recovery. I'm also concerned about others who may require the services and support and aftercare that I received, who will not even have the opportunity to receive these supports.
I'm confused as to why you would take something away that has helped so many people and continues to help so many people, not only for themselves and their families, but for the community and the city.
Yeah, I'm at a loss as far as the gratitude that I have for the people in this program. I don't think they realize the degree to which they help people like me.
You know, I've built some pretty great relationships, so I'm a little worried about what's going to happen when I don't have these groups and activities to meet people, because that's part of recovery.
It's changed my whole life, but I'm still alive. That's all I can say.
What I can say for me, this program was really my lifesaver.
Like I've heard other people say before, I probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for this program.
I only wish that other people would be able to experience what I did and have a life-changing opportunity. This program has impacted me in so many ways that I can't think of my life without the program.
Thank you. We do have Councillor Jackson on the list. Councillor Jackson?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Very transformative stories and lives. Always need to see the visual and hear from the participants. So the report before us is information report basically indicating the end, Mr. Chairman, of the provincial funding July 31st. So through you to General Manager Johnson or Director Elder, Bonnie Elder. So General Manager, maybe just tell us then, why are we in this position? Never asking you to speak for another level of government's decision, but give us some indication as to why we're in this position and what the potential is for, what are the other avenues and options for those that still need ADI services in some manner or form. Through you, Mr. Chairman, please.
So through the chair, this program has been in operations from 2011, but it was never annualized as a base program. It was always a year-by-year funding. So it's been a pilot for an awful long time. It certainly went well beyond a pilot in our minds. We did receive notification as part of the budget piece that came out in the spring that this program would be wound down, and that funding for this program, which is in 17 municipalities, so it's not a universal program across all service system managers. This is something that happened in specific communities who had a need for a higher level of case management support for individuals experiencing addictions as part of the package of things that they wish to work on in terms of their progression through Ontario Works. So we were notified it would terminate on July 31st. We have been working actively with those in the program to find other places for them to seek treatment. Some are in treatment. The government has indicated to us that there will be a 3-month extension that we can apply for people who are currently in treatment, although they say this is for a very small number of people. I can tell you that our staff are projecting that we will have 41 people in that situation at the end of July. They've indicated to us that's probably too many to apply for funding for, but we will do so anyways. So our staff are making the application for that 3-month extension for those who would still be in treatment beyond July 31st. We're actively working with those to connect them with other services. I suppose the piece that's, you know, I have somewhat hope for those that are in the program because our staff know them and are working with them. It's the ones that are coming to us each day or in the course of a year that now no longer have access to this program. So for those in the program, we will work hard to transition, but for those that would seek these types of services, it becomes increasingly more difficult for us to offer something that was clearly, for some of the folks involved, working very well. So again, this was not a base funding reduction. This was a program that was funded year after year, and we were given notification that was ending as of July 31st.
Thanks, Paul. Do you need this committee's support for the 3-month extension for the 41 participants in terms of your application to the provincial government, or is that more bureaucratic that can be looked after through you, Mr. Chairman?
So through the chair, I think what would be helpful is if this committee would take a position that we're appreciative for the ability for that 3-month extension for treatment, and we would hope it would be extended to all of those who are currently in treatment at July 31st. So that would be helpful to us. It solidifies our position. If we had to be in the position of picking and choosing folks, that is a terrible burden to place on our staff in order to do that.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I'll look to our legislative coordinator, Bates, if she could help me with the essence of that wording, Mr. Chairman. After all the speakers, I'm pleased to move that, supporting the 3-month extension on behalf of the 41 participants. You know, it's a shame, Mr. Chairman, we didn't include this in Council's fight, our successful fight, I'll say up to now, with the Ford government's decision to put a pause on the super health care agencies across the province, usurping our public health department and our paramedics. I'm going to say sincerely, I believe our municipality unanimously said no, it's the wrong thing to do. And we heard a short time later the Ford government say they're now going to put a pause on it, at least until next year. It's a shame. Maybe we weren't aware of this at the timing of that we could have included this for a further pause on the overall funding. Another question, Mr. Chairman. At the bottom of page 1, Paul, it says the annualized budget of 1.1 million approximately became fully uploaded in the province in 2018. Am I to interpret from that prior to 18, we were in a cost-sharing mode with the province? Mr. Chairman, through you.
Well, through the chair, yeah, that was part of this long, I believe it was 9 or 10 year process of them uploading the direct service provision. Certain elements of OW were uploaded, so this simply followed that same formula. Year after year, we were seeing more and more of a portion of OW uploaded. That full upload occurred in 2018, which is why in the 2019 budget, you didn't see any savings from uploading because they had fully uploaded the funding that goes directly to client services. So that was more just the technical element of all of the Ontario Works funding.
Okay, and lastly, Paul, I'm reading that public health services through the gambling and drug services that they provide in-house, and some, I guess, agencies in town are doing their best to pick up the slack and the gaps. Mr. Chairman, through you.
Through the chair, yes. I mean, there is a broad network of addiction services, including some of our own that are provided through public health. It's important to note that this funding didn't just provide staffing supports in Ontario Works. It also provided staff supports in other divisions within our department. But yes, we'll work with existing programs, both those within the city and in the community. And everybody is rallying around this, clearly. But, you know, the new money for addiction services and mental health hasn't quite flowed out to see increased service availability quite yet. So it's the transition that's a bit challenging for us at the moment.
Thanks so much, Paul. Mr. Chairman, if we can buy some time, adding our support for the 3 months, who knows? Given the Ford governments, they've sometimes just marshaled ahead, regardless of casualties. In this case, with the the super health agencies, they've backed off, put a pause on it. They've heard enough backlash. Who knows? Maybe the 3-month extension with the support and approval can become a longer extension until we get some restored funding. So I'll move that at the appropriate time. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. We have Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So can I just ask some clarification? The report indicates that there was 229 cases involved with the Ontario Works Addiction Services Initiative. And you're talking, I think you mentioned 40 some odd cases that will need transitional funding. I'm assuming they're specific to addiction. Are there other clients that are receiving treatment for other conditions that are not being captured in this transition?
So through the chair, more broadly on a day-by-day basis, yes, but in terms of this program, so the larger number of 229 would be those, so some will be exiting their treatment and things, so they're not covered. Our estimate is that 41 will remain in some state of treatment as of July 31st. Some are transitioning out as programs come to an end already. But yes, through Ontario Works, we deal with a variety of concerns, both health concerns as well as pre-employment concerns, and are constantly referring individuals to a variety of programs in the community.
And if this program disappears completely in terms of addiction services, where would the clients go? And are they going to have to pay?
So through the chair, where they go would depend on so we would look at the community agencies, both the one we provide through public health, the Addictions and Mental Health Service of Public Health provides, but a variety of other services. Some are available at no cost, and others do have, there are fees attached to certain programs as well. So again, it would very much depend. It depends on the program, depends on the treatment that's being sought, but yes, financial concerns could be an issue as well.
So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the fact that we're creating a transition and the government's offering 3 months transition. It's a little bit disconcerting to hear them push back on the number that you're allowed to put through that transition. You would expect that if there's someone in transition, they would accept it and move on, as opposed to trying to push the city to lower the number of people. I'm more concerned now also with what happens in the vacuum of this program disappearing. And I'm not sure I'm getting a good picture of what that really means without having a better briefing from staff in terms of how many clients are being serviced by this program and how many clients are coming through the door that we simply don't have any place for them to go.
So through the chair, that is a large, there is a large volume on a year-by-year basis who were in and out of this program or potentially attached to this program. It wasn't a program that worked for everybody or met everybody's needs, but we're talking, in the averages of 400 to 500 a year that would be part of this program coming through our caseloads. There are other issues that we deal with the close to, I think we're up about 10,700 cases at the moment. So there are, really what this offered us was an opportunity to provide some more intensive case management, lower caseloads, so we could actually tailor programs and supports to people who needed it. I would suggest to you that still is a need in Ontario Works. And what's happening now is the erosion of the funding means that we're very much a transactional approach to Ontario Works. Our caseloads are in the 120 range on average, some a little higher, some a little lower. You can imagine that does not allow for a tremendous amount of time for additional intensive case management. So I would suggest to you that the broader issue here is, how do we provide better supports from an intensive case management perspective to those who have a variety of needs, not just related to addictions issues.
And there's some of our most vulnerable citizens who are generally invisible. It really concerns me. I don't know exactly how we address this with the government, but there seems to be this big hole that's going to be left in the program, and since they're invisible for the most part, outside of our people, our staff caring for them, it's falling off the radar, and I think that's why they proceeded down this road. So it concerns me, and I'm not sure exactly how we're going to move forward, Mr. Chair, but I don't want to miss anyone, is what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Nan.
Thank you. Through the chair, first of all, I just want to say thank you to all the staff who've provided the services to date, who've clearly had tremendous impact on people's lives, contributed to personal development and transformation. And I agree with both Councillor Jackson and Clark in terms of the concern around the gap that's going to occur. But I just wanted a clarification through the general manager in the last paragraph of the report. Is that what you are referring to as being the transition option? That a business case may be made to utilize the unspent funding towards assisting continuation of the treatments?
Yes, through the chair. At the time we wrote this report, we had not had the full clarification of what transition meant. We got this statement from the ministry, and by surplus, it's not our surplus, it's the surplus of the entire program across the province. which may include a bit of our situation, but it is across the entire 17 sites. So we've since had further clarification. It is 3 months, so it takes us to the end of October of 2019. They did provide us clarity that it is for a small number of cases should the treatment be needed to be extended. And when we suggested to them that our estimates were 41, the response we had back from the staff at the province was that that may be too high a number. So I want be clear that they've said that may be too high a number. That's where we're at. So we are today, as we're working on this business case. We will submit it to the province. We can certainly report back. We will be bringing in another report in July to let you know where we're at. And I'm certainly happy to also bring back a little bit of our sense of what other services we might wish to enhance over time if we had the capability to better address the needs, as Councillor Clark was commenting on. So yes, we've received a bit more information verbally from a one-on-one meeting with our provincial staff, but that's what that last paragraph was all about.
Excellent, thank you. So I would absolutely support the motion that is coming forward. Thank you.
Councillor Pauls?
Actually, this is a question for Paul. You said it was a pilot project, right?
So through the chair, that's how it initially began. However, that was in 2011, and it's remained a kind of year-by-year program since that time.
So it was a different government then, obviously, and they knew about this pilot, right?
Through the chair, correct.
Right. So the new government knows about the pilot, right?
Through the chair, that's correct. They analyzed this program and made their decision. They knew this program was in place.
They knew, but it says here that clients identifying addiction as a barrier to employment are being referred to external addiction services. What does external mean? Is it outside of Hamilton? Can you explain that for me?
So through the chair, primarily those would be other agencies within the community. There are some services that are where the referral might be outside of the city of Hamilton. By external, we mean not internal city programs. There is only one internal program that can support clients to some degree, and that's run through public health. But there are other addiction services both within the city of Hamilton through separate agencies. And then there are some addiction services which are outside of the borders of Hamilton.
And can you name me one agency that is here?
The Addiction Assistance Services of Hamilton.
Canadian Mental Health. There's St. Joe's has a women's addiction program that operates in the west end of the city. So there are both healthcare providers that provide these services as well as standalone nonprofit organizations.
So these 41 that are, it's sad that the pilot is ending, but these 41 could go to those places and get help the same way. I'm just wondering, it's not that we're saying, okay, all 41, you're on your own now. Is there a provision for them with the new funding and they would get help?
So through the chair, with all folks, we're looking at a transition plan. The money that would be available for a 3-month extension period would be for those that are in a program or receiving some services, and rather than have a break in those services, this would continue it so that they could wind down. And then, as you heard in the video, this is not a process where it ends, so that we are connecting everybody with additional services on an ongoing basis. But we do believe for a small number of people that the timing of this just doesn't work out with where they are within the program, and that's why the extension period is something that we'll be applying for in the small number of cases. But in all cases, you're correct, Councillor, we are looking at a transition program so that they can receive the proper supports, be that peer support, be it program support, whatever it is that they need within the community. They'll also continue to receive support from our caseworkers in general. Ontario Works caseworkers deal with these types of issues every day, and they will continue to provide some support. And I do know that some of our caseworkers who are transitioning from the ASI program back into a more traditional case management role have inquired about whether certain individuals can be assigned to them, so there's a continuity of personality as well to further assist them in the transition.
Well, I'm glad there are other services there, and like I was wondering, is Wayside one service as well?
Yeah, through the chair, correct.
Right. In essence, we're really having just to transfer them to different places. But I agree, I will support Tom Jackson's request here, but I hope we can make sure they all have services, so thank you for that.
Can I just pass the chair over to Councillor Pauls? So, through you, Madam Chair, Paul, as you know, I'm a former addictions counselor and also a pre-employment social worker, and understanding the difference between what the primary focus would be in providing outpatient addictions counseling versus that of what this role was is more pre-employment servicing. So we have those are deemed to be unemployable, and those are deemed to be employable under Ontario Works. And those that are deemed to be unemployable are then filtered through an assessment and referral process to determine what indeed deems them unemployable. And in this particular case, if addictions became or it was problematic, then they would provide that outpatient treatment internally. Is that correct?
So through the chair, that's correct. Our goal is to help people return to employment, and where addictions is indicated as a primary reason for a barrier to employment, then we work very hard with what services we can provide. And in this case, we're able to provide some additional in-house services and supports that we hadn't been able to provide previously in Ontario Works. But you're absolutely right, this is all part of the ongoing assessment work that happens. We assess for a lot of things, and this is one element of the client population.
Okay. So in saying that, I presume those that were focused or working with this clientele, were they specialized addictions counselors, or are they Ontario Works personnel?
So through the chair, it's a combination of staffing, some of whom are specialists in addiction work, yes.
Okay, so their sole client base was to deal with the outpatient process of addictions?
Correct.
No other life skills or other issues pertaining to pre-employment servicing?
So through the chair, they would deal with other issues in the effort to move folks forward, but no, this was a specialized team to provide additional supports with a specialized caseload.
Okay. So I guess where I'm headed with this is that there could very well be an argument to be said, and I'm not justifying the decision, but I think to mitigate the decision that there are duplications in some cases with services. So understanding that the primary focus is pre-employment and addictions, look no further than, for instance, the fact that addictions now is considered a disability. We look at, for instance, as an example, a partnership and/or discussions with Path Employment, who deals specifically with pre-employment issues pertaining to barriers to employment, including addictions, and/or other agencies locally, non-disabled, but focused on addictions. In that transition period, are we planning on simply making that referral, or are we going to go into a contractual agreement that any Ontario Works client that is assessed with an addiction be referred to any resource, or one in particular that we're going to contract out with?
So through the chair, we work with a variety of service providers, so it won't just be one. There'd be a menu of services, and you're quite right. I think our concern, if there is a concern, is that the transition be sound, that the timing is correct, so that we're not jarring people. As you know from your past experience, too quick a transition, you build relationships, and those can be broken down very quickly. So we want to make sure the transition is successful. There are a number of services in the community. We think with the right amount of time that we can work this through. It was helpful for Ontario Works to have a specific team dealing with these issues, but there are a number of partners we work with, and we will not be looking to just one partner to deal with all of this. It will be a series of people, both depending on what the clients need, but also there just isn't one agency or one organization that can assume all of these cases anyways.
Okay, and I guess where I'm getting to is that the focus of Ontario Works is the pre-employment to employment stage, and facilitating that movement for a person to become employable. If we were to analyze potentially a referral process that was more streamlined, specifically related to employment issues as opposed to addictions, because their mandates are a little different. Is that something that could be taken under advisement to be incorporated accordingly? Because I think there would be more of a synergy that way. So through you, Madam Chair.
Through the chair, it's precisely some of the work that will be happening over the next year. There is a broader transformation in Ontario Works that's occurring to do with employment and how that works. So I expect we will be looking at all of those things. We'll certainly take that away and think through this. And as this program ends, we're forced to think about how we do business anyways. And with the employment services, the change around that, Ontario Works will have a different role in that whole employment continuum, depending on the outcomes of some of that transformation as well. So points well taken, and we'll take that back.
Fair enough. And if I could just add one more suggestion, there is a youth and adult addictions networking committee that is not only province-wide, but regional in base. And they meet, I believe, quarterly. I was a member at one time. And these are the types of issues that I think they can debate and allocate resources accordingly. So if we can make that referral accordingly as well, I think that would go a long way.
Through the chair, the fact we do have some time, we are working as a staff team not only on the plan to transition clients, but also to talk about, so what's the work we have to do with other networks in the community in order to see this change happen as smoothly as is possible. The last thing, we did put it in the report, is that there is more money flowing to addictions and mental health services. We're certainly in favor of that, and I've never been convinced there's only one way to deliver service. It's the best way that should be our goal. So our hope is that some of that added investment will allow us to create better pathways for folks.
And could we have a report back at the completion of the transition? Just to have an assessment and understanding of where we are today and where it's going to end, and who was impacted and how exactly we did transition accordingly.
So through the chair, yes, I've asked Bonnie to bring a report back for our July meeting, which will happen in the second or third week of July, and then we'll have one for the August meeting as well, which will give you a sense of after July where we're headed. Hopefully the July report will have the answer from the province in terms of what funding we're receiving for that transitional period of 90 days.
Excellent, thank you. And Councillor Clark, sorry, I didn't notice you were on there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the issue of it being a pilot project that started in 2011, did every single year they hand out the money, they say this is a pilot project? Or did eventually it just became annual funding for this project?
So through the chair, they did remind us on a regular basis this was what they call, one-time annualized funding, which sounds...
Which happened every year.
Yeah, so it just never became part of our base, which is why it's being treated differently than some of the other budget implications that have happened in this program.
And since from 2011 forward, Mr. Chairman, do we know how many clients we helped through this program? This 229 seems to be the ones that we're dealing with currently. How many people did we actually help through this process?
So through the chair, if it's okay, I'll include that in the report for July.
And it'd be helpful knowing how many clients ended up leaving Ontario Works and finding employment because of this type of service. It's easy to do the one-off conversation about the program. Over a period of time, it helps an awful lot of people. So let's have a better understanding of the analytics if we can, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yep. Through the chair, we'll bring that back. July will be sort of that opportunity for us to show the metrics that we've achieved through that program.
Thank you. And we have Councillor Jackson who has the motion that's being presented. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Moved by myself, seconded by Ward 7 Councillor Esther Pauls, that the ECS Committee strongly supports City staff's application for a 3-month extension as offered by the province to include all 41 known participants under the ASI program.
Now seconded by Councillor Pauls. All in favor, and it's a recorded vote. Thank you, Councillor Jackson, and that passes unanimously. Moved by Jackson, seconded by Pauls again. All in favor, and it's just receiving. Carried. Now we're moving on to public hearings, delegations, and it's 8.1. Ruth Greenspan from the John Howard Society of Hamilton, Burlington and area, respecting the Hamilton Restorative Justice Collaboration Initiative. Good day, folks. The floor is yours anytime you're ready.
Thank you. I'm Ruth Greenspan. I'm the Executive Director of the John Howard Society of Hamilton, and this is Garth Bell, who will be speaking in a moment. And we are here to talk about our restorative justice program as a solution to deal with anti-racism in the community. Our program is one that deals with all people across the city who have faced barriers. And those would be those in the LGBTQ2S community, those who are racialized, those living with addictions and mental health, those who are homeless. We have been able to work with all of these clients throughout the years. We are 70 years now as an agency that we have been supporting people, just celebrating our 70th anniversary. Fundraiser tomorrow if anyone doesn't have their ticket. Some of you do, so thank you those who do. And what we are proposing, we 12 years ago put a program together with funding from the Trillium Foundation. That was a joint program with the Hamilton Police, the school boards, City of Hamilton Recreation, where we were able to deal with people who had been in a place in their life where harm was happening. And this was harm that we could restore through a restorative process. We went into the schools, we did justice circles, and we've also done them in the community. We've been able to do these circles throughout almost all of the hubs in the city of Hamilton. We have been very helpful when there were issues that arose in Davis Creek, in Riverdale, in McQuestion, in South Mountain, all across the city. And Garth will speak to the process in a moment. But what is working is we are able to ask people when there is a dispute, and many of them are based in racism, sexism, homophobia, heterosexism, we ask what happened. We then look at who has been impacted by this and what is it that we can do to help make it better. The team that we work with includes myself, who also has lived experience as a first-generation Jewish woman whose family survived the Holocaust, Garth, who is identified as Black as Indigenous, Terry Allen, who is one of the first Black police officers in the city. We also have Jim Dockstader, who is Haudenosaunee from Six Nations, and we have others with both lived experience as well as academic. Give the floor to Garth.
Thank you. Garth, welcome.
Hey, Sam. Segal, thanks for having us today. I'd just like to talk a little bit about the process. And our team is one of the most diverse teams in any social service agency as far as being able to meet people where they're at. And with the rise in racism that's going on in Hamilton, and I can speak from my experiences, my family is one of the first racialized families to live in Hamilton. I'm the nephew of Lincoln Alexander, cousin of Ray Lewis. So I've got a lot of lived experience in this community on racism. And what I found is just telling people they're wrong for what they're doing isn't the solution. We have to teach them. And there's a process to do that. And that's when we do our formal circles. And I've been fortunate enough to run about 1,000 formal circles for numerous organizations all across Ontario with a really, really high effect of racism. And we've had fantastic results. And, you know, our system's very punitive. And if you're gonna just charge somebody or punish them for what they've done, they're gonna become more racist. They're gonna blame that. So they need to learn in those circles. The other thing we have is we have access to a lot of knowledge keepers for all the different races that are in this community. We have a fantastic team with lots of experience. Again, I mean, one of the first Black police officers in Hamilton is now on our team. And we've trained about 15,000 people across Canada and North America in this process. The difference with restorative process and the punitive process, it just takes a lot more time. So sometimes Ruth and I just did a circle in another organization outside of Hamilton, and the actual circle was about 6 hours. you can't just rush through the process. There is a process of learning and sharing how not just that person was affected, how our whole community is being affected by what's happened. So, Miigwech, thanks for having us today.
Thank you. And can I pass the chair over to Councillor Pauls for a moment? Oh, sorry, oh, no, we have speakers. Are you sure? Okay. To you, Madam Chair. Garth, you said something that's very interesting, and with the way society is developing between extremes, and it seems like we're becoming more and more polarized, based on the punitive initiatives that have been taken. Your point's well taken, and I want you to elaborate a little bit more about that, and how within that circle, I guess you engage and create awareness to change one's belief system as opposed to beat it out of them type of scenario, right? Can you just elaborate on that?
Absolutely. People are so used to a consequence. Okay, just give me the consequence. How many days am I going to get? That's it. And then they go away and then they come back and they do the same thing because there was no teaching process in that. And when we talk about the punitive system, you do wrong, you get this. In this, we need to have a better understanding of what their thinking errors are. So prior to any circle, we sit with each individual in that circle and we go through the process. And through that process, we're able to correct some of their thinking errors. And I mean, racism is generational, and racism looks different in every community. I work in numerous communities, and Hamilton is a very, very diverse city compared to a lot of other places that we work. And we have to be able to bring those communities together, but we also need to have those communities have a voice in those circles because their whole community is being affected by that racism in this community. And so let's just say we did one with an Arabic group or a Muslim group. We would invite somebody from that community to sit in that circle and go through that process because their whole community has been affected by that. That person who harmed them has no idea of the impact on what they've done. And, you know, through that restorative process, when there's harm done, we just see what happened, right? We just see what happened. We don't know what the intent was, and we don't know what the effect was. And so we need to get together, and that's why it takes so much longer. And I mean, if you look at the court systems, if I break the law, I go to court, I'm in court for probably 3 appearances for 10 minutes each. Restorative circle, that process is going to be about 12 hours. But it's also healing. And it's not blaming, and it's a safe environment.
Through you, Madam Chair, how do you measure the success of that circle process? So what metrics how do you measure it to know that it's actually working?
I'll give you an example. When I started doing this in one of the local high schools, I won't say the name, but it was the most at-risk high school in the city. And I'll go back to about 5 years ago. They had 500 suspensions in 1 year. 3 years later, they went down to 200.
Now, those suspensions, through you, Madam Chair, can you elaborate on what type of suspension?
It was the most diverse school in the city. A lot of it was due to racism, not feeling community, and aggression.
Okay. And can you just briefly go through the process of the circle process that enables someone to come to that awareness?
So in a circle, a lot of times we focus on the person who is harmed. The harmer also needs support as well. And we bring supports for them so that we can also create a plan going forward for them. And we have a balanced circle where it's not going to be you did this, you did this, you did this. We go through a process of what happened, what were you thinking at the time, what have you thought about since, who's been affected by what's happened, and what needs to happen to move forward. And that goes in a process right around. But it's also culturally sensitive based on if it's an Indigenous ceremony, I'm going to invite an elder. I'm going to invite a knowledge keeper. If it's a Muslim one, I'm going to invite somebody from their community to sit in there so that we can learn from this circle. Because if I just tell somebody, you're bad for what you've done, they're just going to blame the other person. They have no idea of how they've impacted that person. So in that circle, we have a facilitator, a co-facilitator, and we go around one question at a time. And once that question's gone, it goes in the fire. We move to the next question. And then we go through that process. Prior to that circle, we would meet with everybody in that circle and go through those 5 questions and make sure that it's going to be a safe place. Now, if it comes out that this person isn't capable to come and fix or have some form of movement and reharm that person, then we can't do a formal circle. Then it becomes a punitive situation. But we have to work with those people. So our team would be dispersed. If there was 10 people in that circle, our team would go out, meet individually with every person in that circle prior to that circle, and then we would proceed with that circle if it was a go. And sometimes it's about finding out who else needs to be in that circle to support everybody in that circle.
You, Madam Chair, I'm fascinated by what you're saying here today. I think what we are missing is the gray area, and I think you've found part of that gray area that needs to be, I think, expanded upon. I think I'd like to invite you back to go through that process with committee, and I'll speak to Paul Johnson and others regarding understanding more about what you're offering, because I think it really is solution-based rather than punitively based, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I would invite you to come to a training session.
I'd love to. Yeah, definitely.
We can give you some dates, and I promise you we'll have a great time.
You can email me, and we'll go accordingly. Okay. We have now. I'll take the chair back. Sorry, Councillor Nam.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you both for being here. I had the privilege of sitting in on one of your restorative justice workshops at the Gibson Lansdowne Neighborhood Association, so I appreciate seeing you here in this forum and sharing the wisdom of the work that you've all been engaged in. I know that it's had tremendous impact, specifically for the non-racialized participants, in terms of the ability to really unseed perhaps an ideological or ignorant path of knowledge in the past towards an understanding of impact, and then from that sense of understanding of impact, realizing that there's other courses of action here that are available for them moving forward. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about when you have to invite who's often in the victim role, or who is representing those who have been targeted by racism or have had to live with the microaggression of racism or the ongoing experiences of racism, to sit in the circle to teach and be truly vulnerable, to share what that impact is as a person who experiences racism. How do you balance the needs of participants in that space?
I would also like to speak to that. So as a Caucasian woman, I also own my white privilege. We have a male who is in the same situation, and we work really hard so that we are not asking those who have been victimized to always have to do the teaching. And we do a lot of accountability work in the group, and certainly talk about owning our privilege and how that all works together. So I think we've come up with a pretty amazing team and work well to do as much work as we can. And we're always working ourselves as we move forward, but I think that's a process that helps. We also have here with us, I'm going to put her on the spot, Marla can wave. She's a student who is at Ryerson in restorative justice, and our hope is to be able to do more research with Marla with us now too, so that we can even get more evidence-based research going.
Thank you for that. I really believe that circles are a beginning, and fundamentally at the end of the day that the work that happens truly happens outside the circle, right? The circle is the beginning place for transformation, but fundamentally restoration occurs outside of the circle in terms of what those individuals who previously have been perpetrators of violence maybe, or some other form of racist activity, how they live their lives after the circle. And I know the process to be quite healing, but fundamentally at the end of the day, restoration happens through accountability of who those people are and how they behave after the circle. So I think it's phenomenal work. I'm so proud to know that you are doing this in Hamilton. I would be very, very in favor of giving the committee an experiential opportunity. I think that would be groundbreaking in some ways for council members to go through that process together. And I would even say to extend it beyond committee and have some other folks from around the table participate and potentially give other staff members an opportunity to learn and hear more about the process as well. One final question, if I may, through the chair. Curious about how you see the role of restorative justice in scenarios where we have, I guess, more from an intervention perspective. Every Saturday, outside in the forecourt, there's a group of individuals who are engaging with our public, our residents, and staff, in terms of our security team here at City Hall, in manners that are ill-informed and based in ideology and certain thought processes of other people. And it's resulting in conflict. It's resulting in violence. It's resulting in seeding a way of thinking in our community. And it's literally happening outside on the forecourt of the City Hall. Curious about your thoughts about intervention versus all the pre-work that's required to bring people to Circle.
I will start this answer. I've just come back from 4 days at a John Howard conference with Lauren Dawson, and Lauren is the leader in radicalization in the country, and that's what we've been talking about for 4 days, especially how we work with the far right. And so there are processes, again, what Garth has talked about, looking at thoughts in error and really looking at the intervention, pre-intervention around the cognitions. And most of the literature Lauren has shared is that these people also feel they don't have a sense of community and feel very much like they have been ostracized. And we are all looking at the ways that we can better engage to prevent. And one of the keys that we know is working with them at a younger age as well. So these are things we're thinking through. I don't have a formal total approach, but I know we're on it. And I'll see if Garth has any other view on that.
I think it's just the opportunity to change people's thinking errors and to better equip people to deal with those people that are standing out there doing that. And I think what the restorative justice process does, it allows you to meet people where they're at. And I can't change them, but I can create a safe space to have those conversations in a circle. And you know, you're going to get the times when we can't do a circle, that it's going to have to be a punitive result. Because in our circles, we're not going to do a circle if it's going to create more harm for either side, right? And for us, it's some of those circles we have to decide on who on the team. I can't be connected to those issues in the circle. I have to be desensitized to those. And so we have a diverse team because I have my triggers. Our whole team has our triggers. And, you know, we have to be aware of where we're at and who's going to facilitate those circles. Sometimes it's even those meetings, because if it's a real deep racist issue and I go do that pre-interview, I may trigger something on their side, right? And it's just like, you know, people who are non-Indigenous going out to Six Nations to do those interviews, they're not going to be receptive to that. So we've created a team that's very diverse that can meet those needs. And then again, it's going to come down to, are we going to create more harm? And if we're going to create more harm, then we're going to have to cancel the circle. But I can honestly tell you, in the work that we've been doing, very rarely have we not been able to bring somebody to good mind. We call it bringing them to good mind before they come to circle. And very rarely with our team, we find out the dynamics and we set up certain individuals who are going to be able to bring those people to good mind. So it's all about bringing people to a good mind prior to circle. And like you said, the work is done before the circle. And that's the big work. One we just did in Toronto, we did, I would say, almost 20 hours of pre-work prior to that circle. I hope I answered.
You did, thank you. So I hear that it's not necessarily the appropriate approach for intervention in the things that we encounter outside in the forecourt on Saturdays, but that there may be value in looking at in terms of the systemic concern and issue of the rise of, what did you refer them to as a extreme right, extreme thinking. I think that the city is at a breaking point of requiring thoughtful, mindful, carefully crafted interventions in order to unseed some of the thinking that's taking root in our community.
One of the things I stress in our trainings, and we've trained over 15,000 people, is I challenge people to unlearn thinking errors. Right? And the longer we keep those thinking errors, it's harder to unlearn that. And unlearning being punitive is very difficult.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to ask questions.
Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Garth, you could easily be a mentor to many young people. I'm very impressed. And Ruth, nice to meet you, and thank you for being here. The Restorative Justice Collaborative, it's youth-centered, correct, Mr. Chairman, through you? Is it targeted for youth? Because I read in your pamphlet, social services under the Ontario Youth Action Plan, violence in school communities. The program began with 150 youth. So I'm trying to understand, I believe that's the target,
That's
is
how
it
it
not?
began, and that's where it was 12 years ago when Garth started it and when we had the grant. Now it is not. We have made it into adult-focused. So since I've been in the agency for the last 2.5 years, we've worked more with community hubs, social service agencies. Garth has also worked more on Six Nations. We've worked in all the universities and colleges, so it is very adult-focused. So we have used the same concepts and morphed it into more of an adult program.
Thank you, Ruth. Yes, Garth?
I would say the majority of the ones that we've been doing recently have been racially motivated with adults in organizations. Sometimes it's within that organization, or it's been that organization with somebody they're working with, and we've been able to come in and make a lot of people heal from it. We were stuck with the youth because that was the original funding for the partnership, and then we expanded the program over the last 12 years.
Interesting, fascinating, and Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to take up a lot of the committee's time, but I love helping and working with youth and encouraging youth. And so was this overall then, Ruth and Garth, you feel the best direction going in the area of adults and expanding the program as well? Versus I find with young people, they're like sponges, and you're catching them at a young age to hopefully help transform and turn their lives around. Mr. Chairman, through you to Garth for just maybe a further comment.
First, I want to clarify this is an Indigenous process. Okay. It's been around forever. It's how Indigenous people communicated, and it got lost. And so restorative justice came back about 25, 30 years ago, and it was all court-driven. So most of these circles that we've done were sometimes diversions for court, sometimes, and one of the things people forget that just because we did a circle doesn't mean there's going to be a consequence. Sometimes there's still a consequence that goes along, but when we find out what was in everybody's backpack prior to that circle, we kind of change our mind a little bit. And, you know, the people that we're talking about that are out here that are very right-wing, they got a lot of shit in their backpack, right? And I'll give you an example. There was Jesse Clark was murdered about 4 years ago in this city, and we had a big meeting at this round table about Jesse Clark and his family. I was the only person that spoke up about the boy who's killed him, their family, because they were harmed as well. So the whole community is harmed when one person's harmed. And we don't talk enough about that. And I agree 100%, the person who was harmed, what we call victim, they need a lot of support. But the other side needs support as well. And we need to help them figure out for themselves what they need.
Garth, I appreciate that, and sometime you and I will have a pot of coffee, because usually my emphasis is on the victimized family as a top emphasis, top priority for sure, but I hear about trying to transform the perpetrator's life as well. Okay, and being on the police board now, Mr. Chairman, we had a great presentation by our police department about restorative justice and how our police services are strongly supporting it. I take it you have a good collaboration and network with them, Garth?
I'm the one that trained them.
I'll take that back to the chief at the next police board meeting, Garth. Okay, so to wrap up, Mr. Chairman, what is it that I'm reading here, Ruth, that you get support from, where did I circle it here? You get support from various areas of funding, and that I just wanted to know what your ask was today, if you will.
So currently, this entire program, other than what we do in the schools in Brantford, we fund through a social enterprise. So we has groups who are able to pay, do pay for the work, and it's roughly $1,500 for training for a day. So we do that pro bono for those who cannot pay. So I didn't put out a formal ask because we would accept absolutely anything that would help us to continue to do the amazing work we're doing. But we are doing it based on others who have the money being able to fund us at this point.
Thank you, Ruth. I just found my notes here, and it says here your many funders, the Ministry of ComSoc, Public Safety Canada, Rotary, Social Planning Research, City of Hamilton through the Neighborhood Action. I take it through the Neighborhood Action Plan.
Yes, we had funding from there. For this particular program specifically, we are not funded.
Okay, so I suppose, Mr. Chairman, after receiving this presentation, maybe we would refer to our staff to see exactly what the general manager might suggest in terms of what other tangible way we could provide some support in the future. Does that kind of cover off what the ask would be? Fair enough. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
And on that note, that we expand upon that to also incorporate the committee in going through that process as well, and council, if whoever wants to participate. I definitely would love to do that. So now moving on to Councillor Pauls.
Yes, thank you, Ruth and Garth. I just want to clarify a few things. I'm on the board of Liberty for Youth, and they do sort of the same restorative justice, but it's just youth. And they, let's say they got in trouble at the school, then instead of going to, get a criminal record, they go to Liberty for Youth, and they teach them. The school sends someone to help them. I noticed that yours, it says assist participant to develop the skills and ability. What skills? Do you provide that as well? Or is it just talking and reasoning with them? And I want to know the difference.
It's getting them to unlearn.
So yours is more not skills?
It's skills as well, because it becomes a new language. It becomes a new way of being. And it's not a diversion. So we also teach what's called prevention circles. So every day I'm in a school and I do what are called prevention circles, building community and building capacity amongst the youth. And it just becomes a way of being. So it's not always because there was conflict, it's also a prevention to conflict. And again, it becomes, Sir John A's, the school, they didn't go down 300 suspensions for no reason. They had the most gang members in the city in that school. They had the most drugs in that school, but they all agreed to get along. They all agreed to not bring to school. They all agreed to have hope.
Right.
And, 3 years to go down 300 suspensions, that is astronomical. And again, it's a way of being. And it's also, it's a new language. A person gets in trouble and they say, why did you? Well, how's your going to respond? I'm going to be on my guard now. Why not just ask what happened? So it's teaching the adults, the youth, the whole community a new language.
Right. So with Liberty for Youth, because I'm on that board, I know a little bit about that. that we get them involved in sports. They have a basketball, they play against the police, and it's a fundraiser. We also make sure we could get them jobs, things like that. So I just want to know the difference. So do you keep track of those students that,
When we do that in a program, yes.
okay. So you do
But this
have
isn't
that
program specific. This is a way of being. This is a way, we're not really here talking about the prevention model.
Okay.
We're talking about when there has been a conflict, on how we fix that conflict and how we heal.
Yours is more around the conflict and talk about it and, you know.
Yes, and so the restorative practice is embedded into every single program in the John Howard Society, but not everybody's at the same capacity to run a formal circle. So I understand what you're saying. I'm good friends with Frederick. I've known him before he started his program. It's not a program for just specific to youth. It's embedded in our programming with that language, but we're here today to talk about formal conflict on racism.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the great things about our job is every day we're learning something new. And then we get to share that with a much broader community that we represent. I sit on the Committee Against Racism, and I've been seeing, actually since the election and during the election, I think Councilor Nan used the alt-right, extreme right. I saw it in the election. I saw and heard many comments that are anti-immigrant, that the immigrants are the problem, and folks not realizing that their families were immigrants too. My family, 4 different nationalities came together or I wouldn't be here. That's how it happened. And it seems to be slipping into our society where we didn't have it as bad as we have it today. Maybe they're feeling more cocky or I don't know, but I'm seeing it. And that's why I agreed to sit on that committee, and we're now going through a process with the Hamilton Anti-Racism Resource Center to, I use the terminology, reboot. But even that process caused pain that I didn't think would happen. I expected people to say, okay, we've got issues, we're going to reboot, how we're going to do it, and yet as we've been consulting with different groups, we're realizing that the reboot was deemed to be a cancellation of the program, and that we were setting people adrift in a sea of racism that was happening. So when you talk about, and I think the history of yours, and I'm sorry for giving me the latitude, Mr. Chairman, I don't usually have long preambles. I understand the history of the healing circles and in terms of how the courts utilize them, and now we're coming to a much broader concept, which really does, it teaches an acquired skill and knowledge that we can continue to have as we move forward. My words, not yours. When I think of what we did to pause the Anti-Racism Resource Center, perhaps there's an opportunity where a circle can be done with the folks that were involved there so that everyone can see and understand each other's perspectives and how we're trying to move forward. And I just want your comment on that. I'm not sure if it's been done before in that manner. It's a unit, but I have no doubt in my mind that the pause by council and well-intended by council, and I supported it, and our staff, three different organizations were involved, and we were floundering, and we had some personnel issues that the 3 communities had to deal with, the 3 agencies. But the decision to pause it really did cause pain. And I don't think anyone expected that when we did it. And the more I consult, the more I'm seeing that pain. Just comments as to whether or not a circle might be something that would help that group and the broader community move forward.
So I wanted to add one piece before Garth speaks. So I have met with people from the Hamilton Legal Clinic, and I have met with Muna, and I have met with Maria Antello, who do a lot of work there. And one of the things that we realize is there are many factions that deal with racism and oppression in the city, and many deal with cultural specific within their own group. What there isn't is a group to deal with all things that happen in a negative way to all people. That's what we see that we do differently because of the way we put the team together. So we don't deal just with anti-Black racism or racism, anti-Semitism. We deal with all. And I think that is a beauty of the model and the work we do, so that it is able to teach skills. And the other thing that I believe, and I have said this many times throughout the community, is that those in the alt-left are really amazing at being organized. Those of us who are working with all others who are dealing with oppression and racism and discrimination, we don't all work collaboratively together.
No.
And this is a process where it is very collaborative, and that's a difference as well.
Just to add to what Ruth said, with our team being so diverse, somebody in our group has walked in those moccasins at some time. So they can help us see that lens, right? It's just like if we were doing a circle with First Nations people, I feel it should be run by First Nations people because I need to be able to see through their lens, right? But I also, what we do is we bring what we call wild cards. So we'll bring somebody who's going to come to that circle who isn't part of the community, but doesn't hate the community that's harmed theirs. So we're putting them and we coach them in our pre-meetings to come to teach. And so then they go through that, and we call them our wild cards. And again, I'm going to go back to what she said. It's the pre-work that counts, right? And it's being able to come in with a good mind. Because if I come in and I am against those right-wing people, how can I facilitate that circle? Because I'm not neutral.
We all have biases.
Absolutely. And throughout our team, we check each other's biases, and we'll say, you know what, Ruth, this is too sensitive to me. And even when we're dealing with two of our members, including myself, our mothers are both residential school survivors. So we have our triggers, and it's being aware of our triggers going into those circles. But then we also put in our wild cards that are going to address all three people's needs. Does that answer your question?
I think so, and I think it's individuals that come from different cultures and different histories have different experiences, and they may not be able to actually see through the eyes of someone else who's been experiencing it, and because they haven't seen it or felt it, they don't believe that it really exists. It's just, you know, a whiner. And what I've been learning in the last few months is it's a significant issue. The breadth is large, but more importantly, the impact on people is really difficult.
I just want to share on what you said. I mentioned before, when there's an action, we don't see the intent.
Yep.
And we don't see the effect. And what Circle does, and that's where I see the shift, is when I figure out what your intent was, I see things differently, right? When you find out what the effect on me and my community was, you see things different. Because when you did that to me, you had no idea that you were going to impact my whole community the way you did. And so it's just having that conversation. What restorative justice does is it slows the process down. It really, really slows it down.
Gives one an ability to be more empathic with the other person, which is...
And you see that shift after the second, third question. You just see people, you see the light bulb go off. Oh my God, I didn't know what I said was so offensive.
I thank you both for coming today, Mr. Chairman. I think your idea of volunteering, I'd be happy to sit in on one of the sessions. I think we can learn an awful lot from an experience like that and then share it with our other colleagues and broader community. So happy to support you in that.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Clark. And we have no further speakers. I'm going to suggest, though, that at the completion of this meeting, I will discuss with Paul ways of trying to expand upon what we discussed and what Councillor Jackson brought forward as well, and then formally address the issue through a motion at our next meeting. And but I must say that more so today than ever before, your approach of finding a middle ground or a gray area is needed tremendously, and I applaud your efforts. Oh, Councilor Clark.
Question, if I may. So, as the Anti-Racism Resource Center and the Committee Against Racism moves forward with their consultations to the broader community, would you be willing to sit down with those folks so that they can understand, and again, start to understand some of the issues that we may be missing? But I think you're correct. A more collaborative approach benefits everybody, because I think this council and the mayor, I know for sure, we really want to see the Anti-Racism Resource Center become something meaningful and really have impact in people's lives. And we can't do it on our own. We need a broader community. So I'll have Mr. Johnson and our staff reach out to you to arrange those meetings. I'll attend those meetings, and maybe you can help us through that process also. Thank you.
And a motion to receive the presentation moved by Clark, seconded by Nan. All in favor? Carried.
Miigwech.
Now moving on to 8.2, and it's Angela Polizzi, respecting youth and developmental disabilities turning 18, being discharged and cut from services and funding from our province, requesting the City of Hamilton support in Noah and Gregory's bill, ensuring that supports continue with no gap in services upon a child's 18th birthday. Angela, welcome. The floor is yours, and you can start anytime you like.
I would like to introduce myself. My name is Angela Priesi. I'm a single parent to an autistic son with a dual diagnosis with aggressive behaviors who has gone missing in the past, who requires 24-hour support. My son, James, will be turning 18 in June. I also am a parent, also a member of Parents of Adult Children with Disabilities Advocacy Group, Autism Advocacy of Ontario, and My Vote Counts. Today I'm here to discuss a crisis that is happening in Ontario. So many of our youth turning 18 with developmental disabilities are being cut from their services and program and respite funding. This is, to name a few of them: overnight respite, funding for day respite, Autism Ontario, reimbursement camp funding. At this point, they're put on a wait list for an adult program called Passport. The wait list has been known to be approximately 2 to 6 years, causing them to feel isolated and cut from our community. Prior to their 18th birthday, they have to endure a 4-hour reassessment with Developmental Services of Ontario. This is divided into 2 days. So many of our youth with disabilities may not have the comprehensive or the ability to participate in this. So therefore, the parent is responsible. At times, the questions can be quite invasive. I'm here today to speak in front of the Emergency Committee in regards to the Noah and Gregory's bill. The private bill was introduced by MPP Lisa Gretzi, named after two amazing men with developmental disabilities, Noah and Gregory. If this bill passes, it will allow adults with developmental disabilities to remain on their child services, services until their passport comes into effect. It has gone through first and second reading in legislation. It was sent to the Standing Committee, where it has been sitting there since February 16, 2019. Awaiting to return to go back to legislation for a third and final reading. It could sit there and never be returned. We are asking for the City of Hamilton to give their active support of this monumental, life-changing bill and contact the Ministry of Child and Youth, Lisa McLeod, and the Standing Committee members to ensure this bill passes so children on their 18th birthday can celebrate instead of them and their families being thrown into a crisis without supports. Please do not let this bill die in committee. Thank you again for allowing me to speak in front of the Emergency Committee.
Thank you, ma'am. And we have Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's stalled at the standing committee, and they have not had any hearings on it at all.
No.
So if this committee were to ask the government to proceed with hearings and consultations on the bill, would that help this process along?
Yes. We're trying to get the bill back into legislation. And so right now, it's at a standstill. They haven't even reviewed it yet.
The member that moved the bill, what party do they belong to, do you know?
The standing committee that's been formed for this, I do have a list of it, but so it's a combination of...
The government members have the
Yeah,
majority there, but
yes.
who moved the bill? Who moved the private bill? What party do they belong to, do you know?
As far as I know, it was moved from so it was read from the opposition.
Okay.
And then they agreed on it, but then the standing committee, and I believe it was from the PC, moved it to the standing committee.
Okay. Thank you very much, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. May I have a motion to receive the presentation? Moved by Clark, seconded by Nan. All in favor, and it's an electronic vote. Oh, it's not. Oh, received, that's right, sorry. Carried. And Councillor Clark, did you want to speak?
On this, I won't take up too much time, I can take it offline also. You can have your seat now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. So, has Mr. Johnson, have our staff had any experience or interaction with the autism community with regards to clients turning 18 years of age and they're no longer getting the services? Do we do anything to help, or? Thank you, Grace.
Through the chair, yes, we work closely with staff out of the Ron Joyce Center. We talk about, the continuity of care as they proceed from the preschool years onto school age and then post as well. So we will be working with them through a lot of their transitions as we have been.
So the continuity of care is the issue, and we get even further down the road when they become adults, and it even becomes more of a crisis than what Angela and her family are currently going through. So is it possible, Mr. Chairman, to ask Mr. Johnson and Grace to draft a letter of support, requesting support of the bill, because I don't think we should just be asking for the hearing of the bill. We need to have the delegations in the hearings, but we clearly need the government to understand that we're in support of programming for that transition period that seems to be falling by the wayside. Is that something that we can do, Grace?
Through the chair, yeah, we can. We'll follow up with that.
Okay. So I don't know if we need a motion to do that. I'm happy to move the motion if that's necessary, but I'm seeing nodding.
All right, so moved by Clark, seconded by Nan. All in favor, and you'll write that down, or?
Yeah, I'm just simply asking our staff to draft a letter of support in favor of the bill and requesting public consultations through the standing committee. And that would be our starting point, and then we could go from there later.
Okay, so all in favor, and it's electronic vote.
And Mr. Johnson was going to say something, sir.
Mr. Johnson?
Through the chair, the only reason I nodded is because we'd be writing to elected officials, to the government. It would be great to have a motion for us to do that.
Fair enough. All right, so the electronic vote. Councillor Nan did, yep. I would if you want, but Councillor Nan volunteered, yep. And that carries. Okay. Now we're moving on to staff presentations and the Hamilton Fire Department Service Delivery Plan. I'd like to call upon David Cunliffe, Chief, Hamilton Fire Department, to present item 9.1. Come on down, Chief. The floor is yours anytime you want it. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's certainly an honor to stand here in front of the committee today to present our 10-year plan on behalf of all the members of the Hamilton Fire Department. If this plan is approved, it certainly will become the roadmap for our department over the next number of years. I hope that you will agree with me that before we go in on any kind of a journey, it's pretty important to know where we're starting from. So I'd like to take the next couple of minutes to give you some insight into where we are today. The Hamilton Fire Department is dedicated to preserving life, property, and the environment. And we do that through providing fire protection and rescue services and emergency management. Given the risk profile of this community, when we put together the services that we're going to offer, we take on an all hazards approach. And you'll see by the pictograms on the screen that those services take on many different shapes and sizes, whether it's in our frontline delivery of rescue, fire service, hazardous materials, whether it's dealing with natural disasters or public safety education, or even code compliance. We take on the all hazards approach. The services that we provide, we segment them into 3 different areas, and we call those the 3 lines of defense. That structure is something that has been provided by the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office, and it's recognized by the province. When you take a look at what we deem the first line of defense, and that's public safety education. Our role in public safety education is making sure that our public understands how to stay safe, how they need to be prepared for anything that may happen, and then how to react when something does happen. And we do this, as you can see by the slide on the screen, all across this community to numerous groups. The second line of defense for us is fire safety standards and fire code enforcement. And our role in this area is to ensure that buildings and occupancies have the required fire safety systems included in them. We also need to ensure that these fire safety systems are maintained in good working operational conditions. And we also have to ensure that the required fire safety plans are in place and that they're practiced by the occupants. Our third line of defense is the emergency response piece, and certainly most people are very familiar with this part of what we do. And for this, our role is to ensure that we have the resources and training to be able to respond to any incident and be able to mitigate that situation. I think it's important for me to recognize the fact that one of the strengths that we have as a city and as a fire department is that we're able to deploy what's called a composite fire department model. And that composite model allows us to utilize both full-time career firefighters and volunteer firefighters. And it gives us the flexibility as well as the efficiency of being able to deploy these resources in the areas that need them as per the risk that's in the areas as well as the profile of that community. Certainly, from my perspective, the way that we are structured to be able to deliver composite service is something that we need to maintain, and we certainly need to make sure that it's sustainable for the future. So, I think it's important for us to understand in terms of how we deploy our composite service, where we deploy our full-time career firefighters, where we deploy our volunteer firefighters, and where we deploy our combination, full-time and volunteer. So let's start off. This slide helps to depict for you where currently we deploy full-time career firefighters. I want to mention that this deployment model of who's deployed where was developed at time of amalgamation, and it hasn't changed since then, and we're still deploying that way. So as you can see by what's depicted on the screen, the former city of Hamilton boundaries, the former town of Dundas, parts of the town of Ancaster, and the parts of Lower Stony Creek currently are serviced by full-time career firefighters. I would suggest to you that this, when it was put together, was what was deemed to be the urbanized area of the city. We deploy Composite, which is a combined volunteer and career response, in 3 primary areas of the city. It would make up a portion of the former town of Ancaster, a portion of Waterdown, a small portion of Lower Stony Creek, and a portion of Upper Stony Creek. I would suggest to you again that at the time when this was put in place, these areas were determined to be what we would classify as suburban areas. Then take a look at the area that is served by volunteer firefighters. As you can see, it's the largest majority of the landscape is services provided through our volunteers. And in these areas, they were typically deemed to be rural in nature at the time when this was put in place. So areas like the upper portion of Waterdown, Carlisle, Freelton into Greensville, into Rockton and Linden, across to the top of Ancaster and through Mount Hope and Bimbrook, the upper part of Stony Creek to the east, and in the lower Stony Creek area, Winona. Today, the volunteers still serve all of these areas. So I show you this slide so that you can get a total overview in terms of how the 3 different levels of service come together in terms of serving our city. And as I said earlier, this is our strength, and certainly something that we need to ensure is going to continue on into the future. I think it's important because when you talk about level of service, I want to make it very clear that other than the staffing model in terms of volunteer and career, everything else from service delivery across this city is consistent. So level of training, equipment, policy, how we deal with incidents is consistent. It's just in terms of the manner of the staffing that we use. So to help you further understand what level of service means, so if I was to say to you, if you get career or full-time service, what does that mean? I think the best way to depict it is based on response time. I think everybody understands what response times mean. So I'd like to show you this. So this is dealing with what I would call first vehicle on scene. If you're serviced by a career response or full-time response, at 90th percentile, you can expect to have a truck on scene within 6 minutes and 52 seconds for a medical call. And what I'm talking about here is what we call total response time. So this is from the time that the phone rings in our communication center to when they process the call, to when they put the tones or alerts out to the stations, till when the firefighters assemble, get on the truck, and when the truck then leaves and drives to the location. You'll see that there is a difference for non-medical, and quite frankly, the majority of that is because they have to get dressed, because they're now going to potential emergency, a fire or rescue or something of that nature. You'll also see that on this slide, it depicts that career and composite are the same. And they're the same because you have a full-time career element in both circumstances. So the truck that tends to get there first is the full-time truck. On the volunteer side, so the areas that are serviced by volunteers, at the 90th percentile, you can expect to see the first truck on scene in just under 15 minutes. You may ask, why the big difference? We need to remember how the volunteer fire service works. The volunteer fire service, when the tones go out, these people are doing other things. They're either at work, they're at home, they're not in the station. The bulk of the difference that you see there is the travel time that it takes them to get to the fire station, to put on their gear, and to get on the truck. There is a little bit of difference because the other piece is that in the rural areas, there tends to be a longer travel distance to get to where they have to get to. So now I'd like to talk to you about the other types of incidents where it's not just a single rig response or a single apparatus response. It becomes a convergence. To do this, I want to talk to you about what we call effective firefighting and rescue force. So at instances like structure fires, entrapments, hazardous materials calls, rope rescues, confined space rescues, water and ice water rescues, we require a convergence of staff to effectively and efficiently perform the tasks, the critical tasks that are required. That convergence, for us to be successful, needs to be a minimum of four-person apparatus. Without that timely convergence of that four-person apparatus, what happens is that our ability to perform the critical tasks in a collaborative way is impeded to the point where it may have the potential impact on the outcome of the incident. So I wanted to bring this to your attention because it's important. People often say, why do you send so many apparatus to structure fires or rescues? It's because there's specific core elements that need to be done. And in here, this just depicts a single family structure fire where you've got folks that are securing a water supply, where you've got folks that are going in and looking after fire attack. You've got folks that are going in doing rescue. You've got folks that are going in doing ventilation. You've got folks that are going in with a backup line. You've got an incident commander. You have safety folks on scene for the folks that are inside. All of this needs to be done in a coordinated way for us to be successful. So now that you have an understanding of why we need four-person apparatus at a fire scene or at a rescue scene, I want to introduce to you what the level of service looks like. So level of service in the area, the urbanized area, where we have career full-time firefighters, you can expect to have four-person apparatus on scene within 10 minutes and 54 seconds. In the composite area, which was previously deemed as the suburban areas, because that's now a combination of career and volunteer that are responding, you can expect to have four-person apparatus there within 18 minutes and 51 seconds. And again, the differential is the volunteer component that's having to take the time to get to the station to be able to get on the truck to get there. And then in a volunteer situation, in the rural area, you're looking at 20 minutes and 45 seconds. And again, you need to think about how that's happening. Because in a rural application, it's not just the station in the area where the fire or the rescue is taking place. We're having to bring resources from adjacent areas across the city. So now that I've had the opportunity to describe for you what the levels of service look like, I'd ask you to try and keep this in your mind as you relate to where I'm going to take you as we start to talk about the plan. So I'm absolutely honored, as I said, to be able to present to you now an overview of the 10-year plan. I'd like to tell you that this is really the first formal plan that we've had as a fire service since amalgamation. I'm extremely very proud of this plan because we did it internally. With the help of department and city staff, I think that if you've had an opportunity to look at it, you would agree with me that it's truly outstanding. And it certainly is something that everyone involved should also be proud of. I think it's important for you to understand that as we put this plan together, we made sure that it aligned with the city's strategic plan, the vision, and the culture. We truly see the fire department having a significant role in helping the city meet its vision, the best place to raise a child and age successfully. I thought it would be important for you just to get an understanding of the type of process we used. The schematic on the screen identifies for you that this truly was an extremely comprehensive and multifaceted process. One where we listened to what our citizens, city leaders, key stakeholders, and staff had to say about what they wanted from their fire department. To guide the plan through the process, we developed 4 guiding principles. First being optimized service delivery. We wanted to make sure that if we were going to move forward, that we were ensuring that the service we were providing was as optimized as possible. We wanted to make sure that we recognized and looked after exceptional people and performance. We wanted to make sure we had robust collaboration and integration. And the fourth was reduced risk for a healthier and safe community. So within the 4 guiding principles, we created 12 objectives. Making sure that we were utilizing technology, finding ways to generate additional revenue, making sure that we are utilizing our existing resources to their maximum potential, and enhancing the value proposition for our citizens. We want to make sure that we've got a skilled and diverse workforce, that we've created a healthy and inclusive and engaged workplace culture, and that we provide our staff with the necessary professional development opportunities. We also want to make sure that we coordinate and collaborate with other departments and divisions within this city, and that we also collaborate to a much fuller extent with our external partners. We've updated our community risk assessment, and we want to make sure that our response is in line with the risks that have been identified. We want to make sure that we're resourcing the community growth demands. And we believe that the fire department has a significant role to play in the city's response to Code Red. So as we put this plan together, one of the key influencing documents for the actions that we've come up with is the community risk assessment. As we updated the risk assessment, it really reaffirmed to us what Fire Underwriter Survey, or FUS, has told us time and time again. that Hamilton has one of the most diverse and complex risk profiles in the country. I thought I'd take a minute just to give you a little bit of background. So when we went through and updated the risk profile, which I should tell you last year the provincial government put in legislation that says municipalities are mandated to do this every 5 years. So we're ahead of the curve by doing this. We've used the provincial template that they provided, and that template allows us to take a look at what the probability of something happening is versus the consequence of the outcomes, and then put some quantitative numbers to it to allow us to prioritize what that looks like. And it puts it in a low, moderate, high, and extreme level. I thought you'd also be interested to see, and this is just a snapshot of some of the risks that we determined as we went through the update. But I thought just because when you look at where some of the growth is happening, they match up with where we're starting to see some additional risk. So in industry, the large restaurant area and high residential, we see a green or a moderate risk in these areas. What I should tell you is these are in terms of general categories. Within each category, if we drill down, we have higher risk in terms of industry or high rise. So we use this as a bit of a starting point, and then we will prioritize from there. In terms of schools and institutions and social housing, when we did our risk assessment, it comes out as a yellow or a much higher risk. And again, within those categories, we do have some occupancies and structures that are lower, and we also have some that are higher. But again, this helps us to prioritize where we put a focus. I think it's also important for you to understand that, again, when we put this plan together, risk was one of the key components, but so was growth. And I think we all know that since amalgamation, there's been a significant amount of growth that's already happened and growth that is happening today that has changed the face of this community and certainly has become an influence for us in terms of where we need to go. I thought it was interesting, our friends in PED had put this out a few months ago, and it depicts the number of building permits just from 2016 to April of 2019. And you can see by this heat map, there's some significant construction and growth happening. While we see that there's a lot of growth and development happening within the urban area, a lot of that is intensification. We believe, based on some optimization, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that we can deal with that growth. But then you need to take a look at what we've identified as 4 areas of the city. The Waterdown area, Lower Stony Creek, Winona area, the Upper Stony Creek area, and the Bimbrook area. And certainly the heat map shows there's a lot of work happening. So I'd like to zoom in on those 4 areas for you. I thought it would be interesting for us to take a look at this quickly. This was Waterdown, a high-level picture of Waterdown 2002 post-amalgamation. Remember that we deemed this to be a suburban area. We've been able to get the same visual as of 2017. And as I show you that, I want you to remember that in 2018 and 2019 to so far this year, we've had significant amount of construction happening as well. But to show you, and we've put red circles around it, there's been significant growth in Waterdown, to the point where I would suggest to you that this area of Waterdown is no longer the profile of suburban, it's really becoming the profile of an urban area. Upper Stony Creek. Again, in 2002, Upper Stony Creek was deemed to be a suburban rural area. And certainly, we know that there's been significant growth happening. As I show you the picture from 2017, and you can see a lot of infill now, there's a large area there between Highland Road and Rymal Road in the upper Red Hill Valley, which is now the Central Park, which if we had that, you would see that it would be extremely intensified in there. Through those circles, you can see significant growth has happened. I would suggest to you that this area also is now moving more to an urbanized area versus a suburban and rural. Lower Stony Creek, Winona. When you look at this, I draw your attention to the north side of the QEW and also into the Winona area. We fast forward and you start to see the growth. And again, as this is 207, there's significant growth that's happened in the Lower Stony Creek and Winona area. In fact, the Winona area was a rule based on the definition that we are using today, and I would suggest to you it's very much becoming urbanized. Pembroke. The biggest thing that sticks out in 2002 is the fairgrounds. Well, you fast forward, and this is 217, and we know what it looks like after 218 and today. A rural area very much, and I would call it suburban, because there's not a whole lot of commercial industrial, it's residential. I show you this because I think it's really important. We're at a point, and I think to answer a question that I'm sure people have, why now? Why am I up here asking and going to be showing you through the plan that we need to make change? From a response perspective, our service levels need to reflect the growth that we've now experienced in these areas. The risk profile has changed dramatically. But with this comes the opportunity to optimize the composite response model that we have. The fact is that we can start to transition some of these areas from what was a rural area to a composite area, and we can start to transition the composite areas to more of an urbanized area. So along with this, to be able to make some of those changes, we need to take a look at boundaries in terms of the shift from rural to suburban. So we've identified 4 different areas within the city. In Lower Stony Creek, we know that the area from Greens Road to Fruitland is currently a composite response. We need to start moving that area from Fruitland Road east to the city limit, from the lake to the escarpment, from a rural boundary to a composite boundary. Similarly, up on the mountain in Upper Stony Creek, we need to be moving the area from Rymal Road south to Golf Club, between Regional Road 56 and Trinity Church Road, from a volunteer to a composite. Between 20 Road south to Dickinson Road, from Glover Road to Glancaster. Again, we need to start thinking about moving that from a volunteer response to a composite response. That would also allow us not only to deal with all the residential and commercial that's along Rymal Road, but also the industrial park that's seen a lot of growth. And then the 4th area is around the airport. So changing the airport property proper, as well as the airport industrial park from a volunteer response to a composite response area. With those changes being made, this is what the service delivery picture would look like. Again, I think it shows the strength of our composite model by being able to modify and transition in the best interest of not only our taxpayer, but our resident from a public safety perspective. Starting in 2019, this year, if we get approval of this plan, we're looking to start to move in terms of maximizing. Some of the first moves that we would make is the conversion of 3 single-function apparatus rescue units here in the urbanized area. We'd move them to multi-purpose 4-person units, allow us to have more effective use of our resources and be able to properly maintain our effective firefighting and rescue force. This will all be done through the use of existing staffing levels and existing vehicles. The second is to look to standardize our apparatus in the volunteer response areas, and we would do that through the redeployment of the rescue units. And then the third area is expanding the development of a multifunctional workforce. Currently, we use suppression crews and they're cross-trained to work in our communications divisions. But we'd be looking to expand this to have suppression crews be cross-trained to help with some of the gaps and voids that we have in terms of training, as well as because of the increased risk profile of this community and the pressures that are going to be on our fire prevention programs, we're going to be looking to cross-train frontline firefighters to increase their participation in the fire prevention activities. This slide may be a little bit busy, but I thought it was important for us to provide you a little bit of a timeline, and this is in the plan that you were presented. Next year, what we're looking to do is, based on our risk assessment, there is a definite need in this city with the industrial component to purchase foam apparatus. Also with our trail networks, we need to be looking at some form of a nature trail vehicle that will allow us to help to extricate people if they get stuck or during a medical call, as well as give us some firefighting capabilities on the trail system. In 2020, we're going to be looking to move forward in that transition we were talking about in Waterdown and Upper Stony Creek with the launch of a day crew. We'll be doing this as we're starting to put our minds to building a second station in Waterdown. You'll see on the screen that station we're hoping to have open in 2022. We've got land identified that is already owned by the city. It would be along the bypass that would give us easy access into Waterdown South, which is where there's significant growth happening there. And we would eventually move that day crew to a 24/7 crew so that we would then have 2 full-time crews in Waterdown that would be supported by a volunteer firefighting force. Upper Stony Creek, same thing. We'd look to move that day crew by 2025 into a new station. Again, the city has a piece of property that we have been talking with our good friends in Hamilton Water that they were going to be putting a pumping station on at Upper Centennial and Highway 20, which would be a prime location to deal with the growth that's happened. And so we're looking to work together to utilize that property and put the station there. So we would be looking to move that day crew to a full-time 24/7 crew by 2025. We'd also look in 2021 then to put a day crew into Winona. Again, that's that transition from being a full volunteer response to providing some support. Daytime is a difficult time for volunteer firefighters. They're working, a lot of them are, and we see a large portion of call volume during the day, so we would look to do that. The same in Bimbrook. Bimbrook is one of our best stations in terms of turnout from our volunteers, but we do know in speaking with them there are pressures, especially when the call volume is during daytime is getting to be 1 or 2 a day. The employers in that area, we want to make sure that we maintain a good relationship because we need to have a strong, viable volunteer force in Bimbrook for years to come. We'd also start looking to increase our volunteer staff. We're looking to take the volunteer stations that are currently at a head count of 25, and we want to take them to 40. That will help us to ensure that we're getting good response. So on average, when we've done our analytics, for every 4 volunteers that we have assigned to the station, you can count on 1 responding at a time. So it's important. And again, we're very fortunate. We have a dedicated group of volunteers that are working with us, and we need to absolutely maintain the longevity of that division. As you go through, you'll see that we intend to increase or move the day crew in Winona and Binbrook, both to full-time 24/7 crews. Winona by 2024, Binbrook 2026. We've done assessments of the 2 stations in Winona and Binbrook, and we believe both are very suitable to house those full-time crews with some minor renovations. So that would be our intent. The stations are in great locations, and we don't believe we need to move those. The other thing that I want to draw your attention is 2025 is the relocation of our mechanical division and stores. You may recall that our mechanical division is located on Bay Street, adjacent to or sort of at the end of Central Park. Central Park is being updated, renovated, actually, in the next little while, as well as with what's happening with the potential film district that's going to happen down there. There has been discussion for a number of years about having us relocate. So we're looking to consolidate our stores operation, which is located on Victoria Avenue, up to a building, and we've been in conversation with real estate as well as Rome DeAngelo's group, and we're looking at putting this, and Councillor Jackson, you'll be happy with this, we're looking to co-locate this at our facility at Nebo and Stone Church. It makes the utmost sense. It makes the utmost sense for us in terms of a lot of staff are coming through the training facility on a regular basis, and we see synergies in being able to get equipment fixed and maintained while they're up doing that type of work. The other thing that is going to be of interest is that we're looking at the possibility of putting an additional apparatus in West Hamilton. Given the LRT, we know that certainly through the construction of LRT, we have identified that we would need to relocate an apparatus into West Hamilton to deal with the West Hamilton and Dundas area. And so we're going to start to take a look at that and evaluate whether we need to do that more of a long term. And the reason is when we're having to do the convergence of the effective firefighting and rescue force, a significant portion of that convergence is coming from downtown Hamilton. So we want to be mindful of what the impact from a traffic perspective is in that area. I know that from a financial perspective, everybody is very mindful of what this looks like. Within the plan itself, we've provided a 10-year both capital and operating forecast. And I want to tell you that when we've put this together with the help of corporate finance, we're utilizing existing reserves and development charges wherever possible to minimize the impact on the tax levy. So what I've depicted here on the screen is the next 3 years of the financial forecast in terms of the term of this council. You'll see that the impacts on operating range from 0.9% next year through to 1.9% in 2022, and that's as a percentage of the fire department operating budget. And the number below that, the 0.1 and to the 0.2%, is an increase based on the overall City of Hamilton budget. I want to draw your attention to the fact that the recommendation in the report that is before you today, it's our intent to bring back these specific asks for consideration during the applicable budget periods. So when I ask for your approval today relative to the plan, it's so that we have directions to start moving forward with that. But it's certainly, we're coming back to get your approval on the financial component. I think it's also important for you to know, because we spoke a lot about response in the first part of this presentation. It's important for you to know that there's a number of other key initiatives and recommendations that this plan entails, and a number of them have to be further developed. And if there's any financial implications that come with that, we'll also be bringing that back to you during the appropriate budget period. But things like increasing collaboratives in a number of areas, both in internal and external partners. Focusing on finding ways to generate additional revenues. We're very passionate about this, and we need to focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion with our workforce. It's extremely important to me as chief to make sure that we're moving the yardsticks to make sure that this department is reflective of the citizens in the city. We need to enhance the use of technology department-wide. We've made some good strides in the last number of years, but we've got a lot of work to do. I think I've said this before, the fire service is one of the last remaining that still like to use pen and pencil, pen and paper, and quite frankly, we need to very quickly move and utilize technology. We need to enhance the wellness and the health and wellness programs for our employees, and certainly one of our focuses is going to be on mental health. We do have some really good mental health programs already in place, but we also need to look to expand that. Mental health within the fire service, and for that matter with any first responder service, is going to be one of those challenges that we need to get a better understanding of, and we need to do a better job about dealing with. We need to continually move forward with continuous improvement initiatives and finding ways to maximize the resources that we have, as well as expand the use of analytics and dashboards, and that would be utilizing the results-based accountability framework. Members of committee, while you're considering to support this plan, I think it's important for me to allow you to get an understanding of the level of support from our front line. Because it's one thing for the chiefs to stand up and say, this is what we need to do. But I think it's important for you to find out and hear for your own ears what the front line thinks of this. So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to first turn to Stan Double, President of the Hamilton Professional Firefighters Association, Local 288, to say a few words.
Absolutely. Welcome, Stan, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Stan Double. I'm the president of the Hamilton Professional Firefighters Association, Local 288, representing 530 full-time firefighters. I would like to congratulate Fire Chief Cunliffe, his staff, and Director Paul Johnson for this impressive opportunity to enhance fire service delivery, making Hamilton a safer community to live in and visit. As cities change and evolve, so must its services we provide to our citizens. The Hamilton Fire Department is very unique as we are one of a handful of composite fire departments in the province of Ontario that utilize both professional firefighters and volunteer firefighters. While growth and expansion are imperative, we must remind ourselves of the uniqueness of the composite model, as both are necessary. A long-term plan must be set to optimize all available resources for us to be successful. I would like to take a moment to thank my members for recognizing opportunities that are setting a course for our bright future as a fire department. Their commitment and understanding has been unwavering. Together, let's make this the safest city to live in while enhancing firefighter safety. Supporting this plan will do just that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd certainly like to ask Mr. Paul Osborne, President of the Greater Hamilton Volunteer Firefighters Association, Local 911.
Oh, welcome. The floor is yours.
It's like I copied his notes. Mr. Chairman, Councillor, Chief, and Chiefs,
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words today. My name is Paul Osborne. I am the president of the Greater Hamilton Volunteers Firefighters Association, CLAC Local 911. We represent roughly 275 volunteers that service our communities of Greater Hamilton. Being fiscal and responsible, our association believes we have a responsibility to the residents of Hamilton to provide them with a top-notch fire and emergency service, while at the same time doing so in a fiscal and prudent manner. While we recognize that change is inevitable due to the current and projected growth in the City of Hamilton, we also need to accept the fact that changes have to be made in the way we conduct operations. However, doing so needs to be done responsibly and without adding unnecessary tax burdens to our citizens, of which our members are. The commitment and obligation the Hamilton Fire Department has made to the residents of this great city matches the commitment Chief Cunliffe and the senior management team have made to the volunteer division of the department, namely recognizing the value of the volunteer division and the value it brings to the surrounding communities for its prompt response times, highly committed and trained firefighters, significant cost savings, and a dedicated force that belongs to the communities they serve. We have seen dramatic population growth in the areas identified in the plan, and this translates into higher call volumes overall. We believe these can be mitigated by the changes included for the volunteer stations. However, it must be said respectfully, there are components that we are uncertain about, especially with some associated costs proposed and data to support such costs. By increasing staffing levels in the volunteer division in select stations, we hope to see an improvement in response times and operational effectiveness. By focusing on the benefit of the volunteer division and the service it provides to the growing regions, we are being much more responsible with tax revenue to these communities and being mindful of the overall cost to the department and the city overall. The Greater Hamilton Volunteer Firefighters Association looks forward to working with the management team and other affected associations such as STAND's Local 288 during the implementation process, where we can provide input and insight to ensure that it is both fiscal and responsible to the residents of this great city we serve. Thank you.
Excellent, well said.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Chairman, and to the members of this committee, and to our citizens of the City of Hamilton, I'm extremely proud to stand here and say the Hamilton Fire Department is strong for you.
Here, thank you, sir. And we have a number of speakers, and before I go to Tom Jackson, as we all know, today is D-Day, and it's also D-Day. Tom Jackson was born. It's his birthday today, so happy birthday, Councilor Jackson.
Shucks, Mr. Chairman, I'm speechless. Thank you. Causing me to blush. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Chief, before I ask a few questions, what an outstanding, comprehensive presentation. And in my old terminology, this 10-year plan and document is like the Bible, is like a blueprint for the future. And I just, I commend you and the management team for what you have brought before us in a very prudent manner, moving forward both first and foremost for the safety, the public safety of our community across the entire City of Hamilton, but also being as fiscally understanding of the challenges our city has, not being the wealthiest community in the province, unlike some of our neighboring municipalities to the east and west. So, Chief, I want to commend you. And Mr. Chairman, this may be unprecedented, seeing the two union leaders. Everybody's got their distinction, and there'll always be a separation between management and the union. But this may be unprecedented, seeing both the Local 288 and Local 911 presidents in tandem with the chief saying that we strongly support the recommendations report and this blueprint, this 10-year blueprint for the future. I think that speaks volumes. And Stan and Paul, for what it's worth as well, we just recently ratified, as you know, the contract negotiations, and just want to say how grateful I am as one member of council for the reasonableness that all sides came to the table on contract negotiations. Chief, always in admiration of your leadership, and also must recognize your two deputies, Moss and Verbeek as well. So a couple of quick questions, Mr. Chairman. On page 127 of the big document, Chief, over the 10 years, I count about gross capital costs, counting Waterdown, Upper Stony Creek, renovations to existing, Winona, Bimbrook, additional foam and apparatus for Dundas, West Hamilton. I count about $36 million in capital costs. Would that be fairly accurate, Mr. Chairman, through you, to either the chief or who may be able to confirm that figure? I'm just reading off page 127 of this document, and I think your presentation and PowerPoint today showed that the first serious dollars for capital, if approved, would be in 2021, the $1.5 billion.
So through the chair to the councillor, if I do my quick math, I think you're correct on that.
Okay, thank you. That's number one. Number two, Chief, I need to know on behalf of existing stations, you touched on it, but I think you touched on it more in maybe some outlying areas. In our urban area, and for Councillor Pauls and I, with the Macassa station, yes, the wonderful emergency multi-use training center at Nebo Stone Church, but existing stations in the urban area, in spite of your focus on the growth areas, existing stations have a future in our community. Mr. Chairman, through you.
Well, through the chair to the councillor, yes, there is no intent to move, close, displace any of the current stations in the urbanized area. In fact, through our optimization, that's we're converting 3 of the apparatus to better serve the urbanized area.
Terrific. 2 or 3 more questions, Mr. Chairman. Chief, on page 3 of your condensed report with the recommendations today, financial impact, service delivery boundary changes may have the potential to impact area rating. Now, unless I'm misinterpreting, I thought we got rid of area rating for fire a few years ago. That was one of the ones that I believe all the communities agreed to. Is this possibly something different? Okay, Mr. Chairman, through to the chief, please.
So through the chair to the councillor, area rating for fire is still in existence and has been, urban and rural.
I seem to recall, Mr. Chairman, we got rid of recreation from area rating. I seem to recall that we got rid of fire, and the last bugbear, the last controversial one, was transit, which still exists. So again, Chief, there is still area rating involved, because for me, similar to recreation that we got rid of a few years ago, area rating, in my humble opinion, Mr. Chairman, should not apply across this city. Every citizen should feel safe and have the same, close as possible, level of fire response and service. And so for me, all 550,000 people should help to pay for that. So, Mr. Chairman, through you to the chief, maybe for a further comment, please.
Chief, can you elaborate?
So through the chair to the councillor, we are area rating fire service, urban and rural. I would strongly suggest to you that the taxpayers in the rural area, there is a distinct difference in the level of service, and to potentially, and this is my personal opinion, get away from area rating would not be necessarily give those residents the same value for the dollar as the folks in the urbanized area.
I guess, thanks, Chief. I guess for me, I wanted to make every citizen, no matter where they lived in this community, feel valued, and that the fire service and response, when needed, God forbid, would be there for them. Okay, I was my curiosity was piqued, Mr. Chairman, that both President Double and yourself feel our composite, unique fire service is still warranted in our community. I would have thought that someday we may, with all due respect, President Osborne, but for a place for those 300 some odd, that eventually a full-time career, 100% across our fire service would, in the future, come to fruition. Mr. Chairman, through the chief, but I'm hearing everyone seems to want to retain the composite.
So through the chair to the councillor, when you take a look at the risk profiles and you take a look at the cost that it would be to put full-time firefighters in all of our stations relative to the risk, I don't think the value proposition would be there for the resident. At the end of the day, the areas that become urbanized absolutely need to have full-time firefighters. And as we are starting to transition some of the suburban or composite areas, you may see over time some of those composite areas become much more career-oriented. I don't think you'll ever see volunteers, from my perspective. You need to maintain a volunteer component and as we make that transition, just from a cost effectiveness, but you will see, I would suggest to you, a larger presence of career staff.
On that point, though,
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman.
now the shift, can you elaborate on the shift? We don't have finance here today, but could you elaborate on the impact the shift will have from in the urban area versus the existing suburban area?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, corporate finance is still working through all those numbers. We will be having those discussions individually with the affected councillors.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Johnson.
No, thanks, Mr. Chairman. A couple of last quick questions. Chief, on page 6 of your condensed report, it says here, bottom paragraph, plan also identifies opportunities to create a multifunctional workforce through cross-training of personnel. You wish to elaborate, please?
Sure. Through the chair to the councillor, it's our intent. One of the things that we have is we're looking to cross-train our frontline suppression crews to assist us with our fire prevention activities. Given the risk profile and the growth of in the need to do more inspection work that would be prioritized based on that risk, we're looking to get them out to do more of that. We're also looking to utilize some suppression crews to assist in terms of the training gaps that we have. We have, and when I say gap, it's pressures in terms of resources. We have a number of training programs, including the recruit programs for both volunteer and career, as well as just our core competency programs that we need to continue to run a number of our staff through. And so we see the ability to utilize existing staff by cross-training to help us with that. And again, it's to mitigate the financial expense to the taxpayer.
Thank you for that explanation. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, on page 2, this may be, I hope I'm not opening up a little can of worms here, but it's from a comment here on page 2 on the first paragraph. The community risk assessment also identifies risks related to severe weather, increased traffic and congestion, narrower streets, and the topography of Hamilton. Narrower streets. So as we're going through this transition across our city with multimodal and complete streets and all that good stuff that accrues from these changes, my curiosity again was piqued by you saying about your community risk assessment has identified increased traffic and possible congestion of narrower streets. Wish to comment or explain, Chief, please?
Sure. Through the chairman to the councillor, we've identified that, and it's certainly something that we are starting to move forward on. So in the next few weeks, you're going to see one of the first. We've done some redesigning. If you will recall, we brought a report to this committee, the great work done by our mechanical division staff, as well as some of the members of the leadership team. We redesigned Pumper to more of an urban standard, tighter turning, shorter wheelbase, more ergonomic. We're going to be bringing that truck into service. The first of 3 are coming into service in the next month. We're going to continually take a look at our fire apparatus design. We see ourselves as we need to do a better job of conforming to where the city's going in terms of the transit master plan to be able to continue to do better, deliver the service. So when I identified it's more for a placeholder for us in terms of what we need to do is continually improve the types of vehicles that we're using and potentially look at different types of vehicles to deliver the service.
Terrific, Chief. Mr. Chairman, obviously, I'm very supportive of the recommendation, happy to move it at the appropriate time. Chief, I'm glad, without jinxing myself this summer, I'm glad the last summer, so I haven't needed you as much at Albion Falls, but I'm not here to jinx myself. Anyways, Chief, your 30 years plus coming up through the ranks in your leadership has proven to be a tremendous benefit to our community. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. And now we're moving on to Councillor Clark.
Mr. Chairman. First, I do want to thank the chief and his team. As you know, I'm not generally effusive with praise, but I found that over the years, the consummate professional civil servants are the ones that actually recognize that they need to do proactive systemic planning. You've done that. This is a remarkable document that you brought before us, but it's not just the planning of the document. You're not coming in headstrong saying this is how we have to do it. You're actually reacting to the changing dynamics and structure of the city of Hamilton, which is quite remarkable, because I've experienced it differently across the province, where you can get some loggerheads and we don't move ahead. So thank you. This is fantastic. And I have to tell you, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to meet with the chief when I was first re-elected, because I had concerns about the changing dynamics in Upper Stony Creek. And when he met with me, and before he even got all the questions out, he'd already thought of all those questions and was dealing with them. So thank you. If we can just go to slide 8 for a second, please. I think slide 8 really does reflect the urban-rural split when it comes to the area rating. And we did change the area rating. We removed the area rating for the suburban part of Upper Stony Creek and Lower Stony Creek and other areas also. And we moved it to the rural component because that's the one area that we could very clearly see a difference. So this is for all intents and purposes where the volunteers are operating, and for all intents and purposes reflects the rural area of the city of Hamilton. And if you look at the next slide, slide number 9, there's a little, right in Upper Stony Creek there, you can see that little pink area where there's a jut out of the green area. That's Summit Park, which has exploded. And you're recognizing that in the plan and talking specifically about a new fire station up there, which was my concern. When we're looking at the 2 different types of response times, if I may, slide number 10, you see non-medical calls. So first on the scene, that could be an accident or something to that description. So volunteer is 16 minutes. When we see the effective firefighting and rescue force, so I'm paraphrasing, but this is the team that goes out, we know we have a fire, and this is what we need to fight that fire, in layman's terms. So the volunteer capacity, the response time, it would be 20 minutes. And that would be out in that rural area, which is area rated. And I think that gets to the chief's response to Councillor Jackson's question. If we turn around and said to the residents out in that rural area, they're now going to pay for the full freight of full-time fire service, and we're only seeing that kind of response time, then there's going to be a backlash. And so that's why we continue with where we are. I was trying to understand the community risk, and that is on page 19, Chief, sorry. And so you had green, yellow, and you have red. Is there, the red area is extreme risk, and I'm trying to understand where you would assess in the city of Hamilton that there might be extreme risk, because I didn't see anything in the report in that way. So I'm not wanting to put you on the spot, but if we're going to have a risk matrix, then I'd like to understand the different levels.
So through the chairman to the councillor, we have a number of specific occupancies or buildings that would fit the criteria for extreme. Due to public safety, we typically don't talk about them.
Right.
But we have a map, basically a heat map that has been created from this metrics that shows that we do have all 3 or all 4 of these levels dispersed everywhere. Yep. And I'm sure you can appreciate, I mean, with the diversity of, for example, our industrial areas, industrial parks, that again gives us some of that challenge, right? In terms of, it's not, in a number of municipalities when they originally did the urban planning, they would tend to put industrial in one area and commercial residential in others. because of the amalgamation of the city, of the municipalities that we have, and then with the increase in some of the growth areas, we've got this type of risk. If you were to look at this chart, we've got pockets of all four of those different levels right across the city.
So there was a time when industry, and I'm assuming industry still has hazardous materials, Mr. Chairman. Some of the extreme risk may be in facilities that have that type of thing going on, where they have hazardous material or explosive material. You would categorize that type of facility as a higher risk.
So through the chairman to the councillor, that's absolutely correct. We have a number of facilities, industrial type applications that I would suggest to you are at this extreme level. The other thing too, it's not just that. I mean, in general sense, given the transportation network that we have across this city, both via rail, air, and by road, there's a number of significant hazardous materials that are being transported through as we're on the main corridor from US to central Canada. So we also identify that as part of our risk assessment. And it's a culmination of all of that when we start to look at things like the need for a foam truck. You know, touch wood, we're very fortunate. We haven't had a whole lot. But certainly, based on the risk that we see, there's a significant possibility.
The airport, who provides the fire services at the airport?
So through the chairman to the councillor. So it's a little bit of a unique situation. Hamilton Fire Department has care and control of all the buildings, the structures on airport property. The airport themselves provide aircraft crash rescue for aircraft accidents or incidents that happen within the fence line of the airport. Anything that happens on the exterior of that fence line relative to an aircraft emergency or aircraft crash is the responsibility of the Hamilton Fire Department.
Interesting. And we don't get funding from the feds for any assistance in terms of protecting the airport?
Through the chairman to the councillor, not that I'm aware of.
Can we just speak about the narrow streets just briefly? I want to thank the fire department because they've been coming up into Upper Stony Creek at my request, because when I first came back into the ward, I noticed that a number of streets were narrow for new subdivisions, parking on both sides, and on some of the curves, it was challenging getting fire trucks around the corner when they're parked on both sides, and so traffic has helped me with the fire department put in no parking on those curves so that we can get the vehicles around it. So we are trying to manage it to the best of our ability, and I just wanted to thank the chief for that. Can I ask a question? When we're dealing with planning applications that coming through, and some of them could be planning applications where it could be industrial area very close to a residential area, are you consulted, is the fire department consulted in terms of risk?
So through the chair to the councillor, over the last few years, we've started to work more closely with planning, certainly traffic and building, because that was one of the voids that we had. We all weren't at the table at the same time. So we've been making a conscious effort, and I can tell you that there is more consultation now taking place than there ever was before.
And the last question I have with regards to the Alpharetta situation, we don't know what's going to happen in terms of the Alpharetta growth area itself, but the decision to site a fire station at the corner of Centennial and Rymel, that really at the moment is predicated just as much on the service requirements that we now have with new development in Upper Stony Creek as opposed to future developments down the road. Can you just speak to that?
Certainly. So through the chair to the councillor, you're absolutely right. So our intent by looking at the location we did is to deal with the growth and the risk that we have today. But I can tell you, based on what we understand in terms of if Alpharetta goes forward, where that growth will take place, I think that the city will be well served at that point using that same location.
Yes. Yeah, so it would serve future needs of whatever number happens, but The real demand that exists currently is we need that assistance there by 2025.
Yeah, so through the chair to the councillor, so that was actually our intent when we started to look for a piece of property was there a way to find a spot that if and when Alfreda happens, that it would put the city in good stead rather than having to look at additional fire station locations.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank you and your team. Like I said, this is a very proactive plan, and it's not every day you see the type of comprehensive nature that this report has. So I want to thank all of you for providing that to the city.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We now have Councillor Vanderbeek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not on the committee, so if you'd like me to move to the end of the line, I'd be happy to do that. You sure? Okay. I won't take too much time. Chief, thank you so much for this presentation, and this is fabulous. And you know, shortly after you became the chief, you and I had a conversation, and you told me you were going to start working on this. And I thought then that it was amazing, but this is truly outstanding. So to whoever worked on this with you, congratulations. I think it's a fine example of exactly what's happening in Hamilton, where we're getting to the place where we're starting to look ahead and put out documents such as this that tell people where we're headed, where they can have some input throughout the process over the next number of years. And so I thank you for the opportunity for me to be able to be here today. I have just a couple of quick questions. One of them is to do with the water down. I'm just looking at the map as it is at the moment, which I think is page 9, and the map that you have on page 32, which is your service delivery and boundary changes. And I see the changes in Upper Stony Creek and Winona. I don't see any change to the Waterdown area. And so is that because the new station and the old station will provide both volunteer and full-time? And so you're not sort of treating it more as an urban area fire station?
So great question through the chair to the councillor. So because Waterdown now is already a composite response area, what we're doing is we're enhancing that level of composite response, moving it more towards the urbanized. So yes, the new station and the existing station are going to work together to deal with the growth and the risk that's happened in Waterdown. So there doesn't need to be any boundary change.
Great, thank you. And just on another note, the need for more equipment, I guess for lack of another word, in the West Hamilton area, I would appreciate if you and I could have a conversation outside of this meeting. I don't want to take time in the meeting, but if we could have a conversation in the next few weeks about that, I just have some questions, and I'd just like to get some clarification. So again, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pauls.
Okay, through the chair, just one couple of questions. First of all, on the medical calls, are the medical calls when it's a fire and it's a medical, or it's just medical like somebody had a heart attack? Would you go? Like, is that what it's as well?
So through the chair to the councillor, so Hamilton Fire Department responds to medical calls that are part of a tiered response agreement with our friends in the paramedic service. We typically we only go to life-threatening calls, so things, people having heart attacks, vital signs absent, severe bleeds. So the medical calls that are depicted in terms of response time reflect that type of call.
Okay, that's great. So the city's growing, so we have a 10-year plan to do the fire department and all that. Are you working together with the paramedics? Because also the paramedics need to expand. Is there where the paramedics and the fire department are together in the same location? How does that work?
So through the chair to the councillor, so currently we share most of our station locations with the paramedic service already. Okay. We do work together on a daily basis with both frontline paramedics and firefighters, as well as the two leadership teams. We certainly, as part of the plan, we've identified some areas where we want to work together with the paramedic service. We're very much endorsing Chief Sanderson's wish and requirement to take hold and control of the dispatch service. That would help us both tremendously in terms of our ability not only to get a simultaneous dispatch happening in terms of the fire and paramedic service, but it would also give us an opportunity to utilize a new AVL system that we've put in place in our apparatus that the paramedics are running, so that if there was a paramedic unit and a fire unit in a similar location, and depending on the type of call, that we wouldn't necessarily need to dispatch both. Because we all have other jobs and things that we're involved in. So we want to make sure we're having the best utilization of the joint resources in the best interest of the taxpayer. So we certainly are working together on that. We're also, as part of the plan, working with Chief Sanderson and his team to take a look at the whole tiered response agreement itself. And see whether or not, based on some changes in terms of how they treat patients, whether or not we are still required at some of what are currently deemed as life-threatening situations that we may not need to go to in the future.
My question was not only for the response, but at the location. So I see the map there. So if it's growing, we also need paramedics on those locations as well. So can it be a vision like having the fire department with the paramedics in those locations that we're growing? It's not part of this plan, right?
So through the chair to the councillor, Chief Sanderson has a different future deployment model that he's working on that I'm sure that at some point he'll be sharing. Certainly our intent is the stations where paramedics are already existent, which is pretty much all of them other than the two that we identified. If that's what Chief Sanderson wants, we certainly want to maintain their presence with us, but I think he'll be better to speak to you about that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nan.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Chief, for this comprehensive strategic plan. I've gotten to page 124, I'll admit it. So I appreciate the depth. I also appreciate a comment that you made up front about the fact that you're really proud about the fact that you did this internally, that you didn't hire an external consultant to do this work, that as a division, you undertook looking at the organization as thoroughly as possible and integrated the work inside of the team. And I think that that is a commitment to organizational development and also leadership development in the team and the division, and I applaud you for that work and approaching it that way. I see a lot of value throughout the organization and the division throughout the document. I also appreciate the emphasis on a few points. So one, you had mentioned EDI, you had mentioned Code Red, and you had mentioned the climate, and I see how you're integrating and aligning to our corporate priorities. So in the action plan component, I don't know if I missed something, but on page 124 in the binder, the section around actions related to the objectives around Code Red responses is empty. Yep. Do you want to tell us why?
Yes, through the chair to the councillor. So one of the things, as we were developing the plan, we identified that we strongly believe that we have a key role to play. We haven't drilled down in terms of what that role looks like yet, councillor. We just know that we believe, based on the level of trust and confidence that people have in our staff, our frontline staff, and the fact that we are out there on the streets, shoulder to shoulder, all the time, that there's absolutely something we can do. So part of where we're going in terms of the future development of the action items here is to sit down with the key stakeholders and help to start having those types of conversations about how can we help and how can we get involved.
Excellent, thank you. As a councillor of a ward that it had included a lot of the priority neighborhoods for action. I know that anecdotally from residents, whether they're in city housing, whether they're residents who are living in kind of stressful situations, they've really appreciated the service of our fire staff, and specifically the proactive pieces around the education components that a lot of frontline workers provide right there on the spot, but also the provision of free, if needed, smoke alarms and information about how to have them installed properly. So I think that that is a tangible action that the division's been taking over the years, and that would be a response to Code Red, definitely. If we could move to climate, I read through all of them, and the framework speaks a lot about emergency planning and response related to extreme weather events, which is one element of climate action preparedness that we need as a city. The other one might be, how do we mitigate the impact of our own operations on contributing to climate? And so some of the conversations for the city, and I know Public Works is looking at this a lot, is what is the impact in terms of how we design our facilities from a passive design perspective, as well as what are the choices that we're making about our future fleet in terms of not contributing to air quality depreciation or energy hogging. I don't know what other word to use. So I just wanted to flag that as an area that I felt like could integrate over the years, and as you're preparing for your capital plans inside this document. And the final comment would be around, just an appreciation in the final piece around the skilled and diverse workforce. It's clear in the conversations that I've had with you over the course of the 6 months of serving as a counselor that this is an area that you're absolutely committed to, from a recruitment perspective, from a selection perspective, from a how do we inspire and direct younger folks to choosing firefighting, and getting a broader community group, ethnically, gender, all of the diversity pieces interested in this conversation. And so I was excited to see the FIT program expanding its outreach to other segments of our community. I think that there is some interesting work that could be done there that will tangibly result in meeting the goals and targets that you set inside the strategic plan. So I really just wanted to say I appreciate that, the thoroughness with which you are integrating an EDI lens around the diverse workforce piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Chief. Thank you so much, firstly, for the invitation, and most importantly, the putting this all together, the comprehensive report that's been done, and it's a living report, and I'm really pleased to see that. Actually surprised that it's taken 19, I'm not going to say that. It's not that it's taken 19 years, because that's not true, but it's been 19 years before we've been able to formulate this. And I think it's most important. I think the timing is actually perfect in light of all of the growth and development that you're showing up there, and certainly as a Winona councillor now, I see it every day when I'm out there, and I see the issues that all of you have to deal with on calls, and it's not pretty at times, and I know that. I think it's interesting that, I was chair of fire licensing in 1994 in Stony Creek, and that's when we did the study for the 2 part-time stations, and I'm pleased to hear that they are still strategically in good areas to drive future needs in the Stony Creek, Winona area. And I really believe that this is a document that's going to carry us forward more than 10 years. And as we do move forward, I'm hoping, and this may be my question, is that we will continue to update this so that we can bring it forward and give us a timeline. You mentioned 5 years. We're supposed to be doing this every 5 years?
So through the chair to the councillors, so the 5 years is on the risk assessment piece in terms of updating. We actually will be updating it on an annual basis because our risk assessment is changing that rapidly. Relative to the 10-year plan, it's certainly our intent that this becomes a perpetual document. With the amount of time and energy that that staff have put into this. It serves us well that on an annual basis, when we come back and we evaluate our successes, that we have the opportunity to add another year, so that this isn't one of those documents that's going to sit on a shelf. This clearly becomes the perpetual roadmap for this department.
And that's how I interpret it, and I'm really, really proud that they've taken that initiative, because I think it's most important. Just wanted to add too, I mean, in light of the fact of not just climate and everything else, we also have to look at, I mean, things are different, people are living differently, traffic is changing. There's so many things going on, and I just see, even just being out on the QEW or on the service roads in Stony Creek, there's been tremendous number of changes in the amount of growth. So whatever we're able to do in factoring in where we strategically place the expansions is most important. And again, I think I'm proud to be here as a councillor in the city of Hamilton. I mean, I know our staff took the initiative a few years ago of doing the asset listing of all of our city assets, and I think we were leaders in the province at that time, and I'm pleased again to hear that again we are leaders of the province. And Chief, I commend you and everyone here today and everybody who is involved and will continue to be involved in this report going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson. Oh, sorry, Clerk.
So just to the recommendation, Mr. Chairman, recommendation A talks about that the appendix with no financial impact to the 2019 budget be approved, but it's actually dealing with the service delivery plan of 2019 to 2028. So there's no impact to the budget in year at all?
So through the chair to the councillor, no, the optimization plan that identified those three items, there is no impact to budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And we have no further speakers. We had a motion put forward by, moved by Jackson, seconded by Paul, that we received the presentation. Before we do that, I just want to say, sir, that we in Hamilton, with the men and women of the fire service, are very privileged and honored to have you there. And I applaud your efforts and continued success. Thank you, sir. And now, all in favor? Carried. And on the report itself, moved by Jackson, seconded by Nan, all in favor? Carried, and it's a recorded vote. Okay, moving on, we are now at 10.1. Are there any questions regarding poverty reduction investment plan? Hearing none, moved by Clark, seconded by Pauls, all in favor, and it's a recorded vote. No, it's a receiving, we're just receiving it, sorry. Carried. And on motions, we have Councillor Pauls regarding a Ward 8 issue. And Councillor Pauls, would you indicate, please?
Okay, moved by myself, second by my Councillor Jackson. Thank you. And this is, I won't read, this is installation of fencing around City House and Hamilton waste bins at 44 Montcalm Drive, Hamilton, and it is Ward 8. Whereas resident of City Housing Hamilton property deserve dignified and safe, affordable housing, and improvements to the exterior of the City Housing in Hamilton are needed to store and improve waste collection. Therefore, be resolved that $3,150 be provided to City Housing Hamilton to help fence waste bins from the Ward 8 area rating, Reserve 108058, and that the mayor and the city clerk be authorized and directed to execute any required agreement, and ancillary documents, with such terms and condition in a form satisfactory to the city solicitor. Thank you. Everybody in favor?
Okay, and that's moved by yourself and seconded by Councillor Jackson.
Yes.
All in favor, and that's a recorded vote. Okay, next we have a notice of motion. Are you going to be waiving the rules? Yes. So So moved by yourself, seconded by Councillor Jackson to waive the rules on 12.1. All in favor? It's a recorded vote. Okay, and on the motion itself, Councillor Nan, the floor is yours. If you could please indicate. Oh, there you go. I got you. Oh, here I got you.
Thank you. I appreciate the waiving of the rules. That is time sensitive as Pride is taking place this month. And the annual celebration will be taking place in Ward 3 at Gage Park. And so I am happy to put forward some funds to support the event through the Ward 3 Cellular Tower revenue in the amount of $3,000 to help with the cost of the large event, but also to ensure that we're celebrating the lives of our residents who attend either as members of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community or as allies and friends and family of. So moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Jackson.
Okay, all in favor, and it's a recorded vote. All right. And we've come to this time. Motion to adjourn.
Wow.
What? I don't have that on me. Outstanding business. Okay. On the outstanding business, may I have a motion accordingly? So, okay, Councillor Jackson, can you indicate, please?
Yes, but I was just going to, sorry, thank you. I was just going to indicate, Ms. Bates, 13.1 AA Tamara, should that now not be removed? That was the 10-year plan. You have it down for, right, to be removed instead? So with that, oh. Okay, so I'm just saying that should be now removed because it's showing here under new due date. Okay, I'll move the list.
Moved by Jackson, seconded by Nan, with respect to dealing with the outstanding business list. All in favor, and it's a recorded vote. Now, we're going to be, there's going to be a motion to adjourn. Moved by Clark, seconded by Nan. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everybody. And happy birthday, Tommy. Totus Tamajin.